Chapter 864. Without the slightest precaution or apprehension, their lord had thrown them a thunderbolt just like that. Just 6 words, like a sudden clap of thunder, shocked the 3 trusted advisors so much that they didn't know what time it was. Attack the northern borderline now? My lord, you want to ascend to the heavens? What are we going to use to fight? Our heads. Even Feng Zhen, who was always joking and frivolous, was so frightened by Jianghu that he didn't dare to speak. Qiguan Rang didn't seem to have any reaction, but the feather fan in his hand was fanning furiously. It was obvious how anxious he was. Wei Ci was the first to react. He stepped forward and said, "My lord, you mustn't do that." Attacking the northern borderline now wasn't courage, it was courting death. Wei Ci had thought that his lord was more mature in this life than in her previous life, but now it seemed that she was even more reckless. Jianghu laughed in her heart, but she asked, why not? She didn't do it on a whim. She had clearly thought it through. They all treated her like an enemy, as if she was unreliable. Feng Zhen and Qiguan Rang followed closely to persuade her. No matter what, they had to make their lord dispel this dangerous idea. Qiguan Rang said, "My lord, attacking the northern borderline now is not a good time." Feng Zhen secretly took a deep breath. He stepped forward and said, "I agree with the 2 of you. The northern borderline has experienced the horse plague and suffered a great loss in military strength, but a centipede dies but never falls down. If we don't have the confidence to kill them in one strike, we can't easily attack the northern borderline. Attacking now is no different from striking a rock with an egg. The books on war say that the military is a matter of great importance to a country. It is a place of life and death, a path of survival. In our opinion, we need to go through 5 things: take advantage of the right time, the right place, and the right people. Only then can we give it our all. The time is not ripe yet, so we must not attack." Previously, they had agreed to peacefully develop for a few years before going to war. Why did their lord change her mind now? The 3 of them groaned in their hearts, but they also understood Jianghu's temperament. If they didn't say the ugly things, it would be difficult to convince her to give up on this idea. Jianghu sat in the seat of honor and leaned against the table. She said to Feng Zhen, "Zisher, continue." Feng Zhen said, "The so-called 5 things are Tao, heaven, earth, general, and law." The so-called Tao referred to the agreement between the lord and the generals, and they could live and die together. The so-called heaven referred to the seasons and climate. The earth referred to the terrain conditions. The general referred to the martial arts and abilities of the generals. As for the law, it referred to the organization of the army, the division of duties between generals, and the logistics and material reserves. Now, we disagree with our lord, and we don't know the terrain of the northern borderline and the weather conditions after the war. Although our generals are strong, the newly recruited soldiers have not been trained properly. As for the logistics and provisions, there is a huge gap. It will take 2 to 3 years for the army to be effective. Now that we have started the war, the conditions in all aspects are not ripe yet. I hope that my lord will think twice before acting and consider it carefully. To put it simply, if Jianghu went head-to-head with the north borderline in her current condition, she would definitely be the one to die. Feng Zhen and the others couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. Why did their lord suddenly want to attack the northern borderline? Which idiot instigated this? Jianghu smiled and said, "I understand what Zisher is saying." Since she understood, why did she still have such a bold idea? Feng Zhen and the others complained about her incompetence. They even suspected that their lord was deliberately making fun of them. Jianghu's next words made them so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. "However, I still want to fight." Wei Ci didn't say a word. He just secretly watched Jianghu's expression. Qiguan Rang, who was beside him, slowed down his fanning. He said, "Can you tell us the reason, my lord?" His lord's wisdom was not inferior to that of an ordinary strategist. Her thoughts were even more imaginative. She might really have a reason for doing this. Jianghu said, "Of course, it's impossible to contend with the northern borderline with just Wanzhou alone. Moreover, I'm not saying that we have to fight now. The three of them were speechless. They inexplicably felt like they had been F***ed. Qiguan Rang's eyes darkened. He seemed to have thought of something, and a layer of worry appeared in his heart. Then what do you mean, my lord? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pengji said, I think it's time to discuss it with my father. The situation in Wanzhou has stabilized. The recruitment of troops is proceeding smoothly, but Chongzhou and Hu County are both in my father's hands. I don't understand the situation there. Even with my father's help, the trouble we'll encounter will not be small. Those who are loyal to my father may not be loyal to me. While it's still early, I want to merge the existing forces into one as soon as possible. Only when the people's hearts are completely united can we have a chance of winning against the northern borderline. Feng Zhen's eyes turned. He seemed to understand Jiang Pengji's reasoning. He asked, My lord, are you worried that your stepbrother has ulterior motives? Lu Shi only had a son and a daughter. In the future, the family property would definitely be divided between the two children. The stepbrother was now 14 years old. In a few years, he would be able to establish his own family. If he was ambitious and competed with Jiang Pengji, it would indeed be troublesome. The external threat had not been resolved yet, but internal problems had arisen. If the siblings fought and held each other back, how could they stand firm in this chaotic world? The best way was to completely stabilize their position and power before the stepbrother grew up. Now that Jiang Pengji wanted to attack the northern borderline, it was an excellent excuse to take over the military power of Chongzhou and Hu County from Lu Shi's hands. The three trusted subordinates had their imaginations run wild. They were all convinced by their own ideas. Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh. She was unwilling to explain too much. They would know the truth when the time came. Lu Shi naturally supported her. However, even if she was Lu Shi's daughter, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou and Hu County might not be willing to accept her. Jiang Pengji did not want to attack the northern borderline a few years later. Her subordinates were still disorganized and in a mess. She continued, Today, I met someone. This person may be the breakthrough point for us to gather the forces in Chongzhou. Chongzhou and the northern borderline are borderline. Once war breaks out, it will definitely be embroiled in the flames of war. As for Hu County, that place has a vast land but a small population. Although it produces a lot of grain, if we farm for a few years, it will be enough for the war. From the looks of it, gathering Chongzhou is far more important than gathering Hu County. When Wei Ci and the others heard this, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Based on what their lord meant, they should start preparing for war now instead of fighting. They could be at ease. Wei Ci asked, Who is this person? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, That person is a direct descendant of the Chui family in Chongzhou. We can make friends with the Chui family in the name of saving their lives and persuade them to stand on our side. The Chui family is a fence-sitter. They have close business dealings with the northern borderline. In other words, they are the most knowledgeable about the situation in the northern borderline. If we want to start a war with the northern borderline, we must have an accurate source of information. Apart from that, the Chui family has been rooted in Chongzhou for a long time. If we take down the Chui family, we can use them to gather other local gentry families. Regardless of whether it was external or internal, the Chui family could be Jiang Pengji's springboard. Lu Shi had been the magistrate of Chongzhou for many years. Although he controlled part of the power, the majority was still in the hands of the local aristocratic families in Chongzhou. These aristocratic families had many thoughts. The interests of the family far surpassed the righteousness of the country. They could totally stab their teammates in the back at a critical moment. Jiang Pengji did not want someone to plot against her behind her back when she was fighting a war. Chapter 865. The three of them were smart. How could they not understand Jiang Pengji's plan? But in that case, she would have to take away Lu Shi's power. This meant that there would be a conflict of interest between father and daughter. If Lu Shi was old, it would not be too much to abdicate. But Lu Shi was still in the prime of his life. Would he be willing to give up his military power and be a free rich man? Whether it was Wei Xi or Feng Zhen, they had no confidence in this matter. Qiguan Rang turned his gaze to Jiang Pengji and hinted vaguely, "My lord has to discuss this matter with the old master." Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes and said, "I know. Father will understand." Qiguan Rang waved his fan and said, "If we can cooperate with the Chui family and understand the situation and military deployment in the northern borderline, we will have the geographical advantage. Popularizing the method of farming will completely solve the food shortage in 2 to 3 years. The army will be self-sufficient. The generals have rich experience in war and are very familiar with training troops. In the long run, they will definitely be able to train up a fierce and powerful army. At the same time, the northern borderline will be greatly weakened by the horse plague. Later, with Xixiao's strategy of rabbits and sheep, we will have the power to fight the northern borderline in 3 to 5 years. It's said in military books that the poor of a country will lose to the teacher, and the people will be poor." Wei Xi added, "If we fight the northern borderline, the long-distance transportation of food will inevitably increase the pressure. The price of food near the army will skyrocket. The local people will be affected and their financial resources will be exhausted. More importantly, the longer the transportation of food is, the higher the risk. Once the food line is cut, the soldiers at the front will be in a desperate situation. In my opinion, my lord can send people to farm in Chongzhou and greatly reduce the transportation of food, so that the soldiers will not have to worry about the rear. If food was transported from Hu County or Wanzhou to the front line in Chongzhou, the consumption would be unimaginable. In ancient times, the transportation of food mainly relied on manpower and animal power. The journey was long and time-consuming. It did not mean that the front line would receive the same amount of food as the amount of food transported to the front line. The animals that transported the food had to eat, and the laborers that transported the food had to eat too. If the front line received 1 dan of food, the rear had to send 20 to 30 dan. If there was a war, it was best to farm in a large scale near the front line. This would greatly reduce the risk and consumption of food transportation. But, if that was the case, Wei Xi could not help but frown when he thought of other things. Jiang Pengji asked him, "Zixiao, did you think of something?" Wei Xi's expression stiffened. He sighed and said, "Due to the impact of the horse plague, the economy of the northern borderline has been severely damaged. As a result, the price of foodstuffs has skyrocketed. A large number of lowly herdsmen are unable to afford foodstuffs and live a difficult life. If the northern borderline knows that we are stationing farmland on a large scale at the border of Chongzhou, when the time comes, it will definitely attract a large number of cavalry to plunder." Xi's consideration was not thorough. "I'm afraid that the plan just now will not work." If that was the case, all the grain they had planted in the fields would be taken away by the northern borderline. Were they storing food for themselves or sending food to the enemy? When Wei Xi understood this, he felt ashamed and bowed to ask for forgiveness. Jiang Pengji said, "You're right. Why do I need to apologize? It was a good idea to station fields at the border of Chongzhou to reduce the consumption of grain. If the northern borderline sends their cavalry to raid us, we don't have to be afraid. We can directly use these people to practice and get used to the northern borderline's fighting style in advance." However, Zi Zhao's suggestion had to be changed. Farming is fine, but it cannot be concentrated in one place. Set up a few more. Currently, the northern borderline could not mobilize their cavalry on a large scale. They could only plunder on a small scale. If the northern borderline's cavalry came to plunder, they would not be able to plunder much at one time. The losses were small, and they could use them to practice. If the grain was stored in one place, if the enemy sneaked around and attacked from behind, wouldn't it be awesome to burn the granary? The 4 of them discussed the details in detail. Only when the first rays of dawn were slightly tipsy did Jiang Pengji end the topic reluctantly. The 3 strategists who were forced to stay up all night to work overtime were speechless. "Let's stop talking about this first. I'll write a letter to my father and explain the reason to him. He will support me." Jianghu stretched her body peacefully and said to the three of them, "Do you want to stay for breakfast? Today's breakfast is pork buns with mushrooms. It tastes delicious." Feng Zhen was used to wandering around. He often stayed up late, but he was not tired. Qiguan Rang's work and rest schedule had always been stable. He paid attention to his health, but his lord was inhumane. He was used to staying up late. Needless to say, Wei Ci did not even have eye bags after staying up all night. "Thank you, my lord." The three of them ate breakfast with Jiang Pengji and went back with their heads full of battle details. Feng Zhen and Wei Ci were both single people. Their mansions were close to each other. When he and Wei Ci returned, he would shake his head while reminiscing about the craftsmanship of the kitchen in the district headquarters. Chapter 866. Unbeknownst to him, Li Yun was still smiling brightly. "My father has already asked for the Lord's opinion. Now he's just short of visiting her personally, but I..." The smile on Li Yun's face was unbearable to Wei Ci. "I keep feeling that I need to prepare something more. Both of you are experienced and knowledgeable, why don't you give me some pointers?" "Oh, is that so?" Wei Ci chuckled softly. Li Yun inexplicably felt a tingling chill run down his spine. The chill left as quickly as it came, quickly disappearing without a trace. Feng Zhen was a shrewd man. He acutely noticed that Wei Ci's emotions were a little off, but Li Yun, the simple-minded youth, was too slow to notice. He had an idea. He tiptoed and rested his hand on Li Yun's shoulder. He teased him with a smile. "Han Mei is already a man in his 20s. He should have started a family long ago. This is a rare joyous occasion in Wanzhou. It must be a grand affair. It must be done in a lively and joyous manner." Wei Ci's thoughts went astray for a moment, but Feng Zhen would not misunderstand. There were indeed a lot of bachelors in Wanzhou. Now that Li Yun was leaving the group, it was a joyous occasion. Come. Let me, an experienced man, give you a few pointers." There's no use asking Zixiao. He's still facing a big problem himself. Feng Zhen and Li Yun put their arms around Li Yun's shoulders, a mischievous smile on their faces. Li Yun subconsciously felt that Feng Zhen was unreliable, but he was not wrong. Although Feng Zhen was unrestrained, he was still a married man. He had a well-behaved, adorable, and sensible son. What about Wei Ci? It was true that he was gentle and humble, but he was still a bachelor. Asking for pointers on such matters was indeed a little irrational. "Please enlighten me, Mr. Feng," Li Yun said obediently. Feng Zhen glanced at Wei Ci out of the corner of his eye. He saw that Wei Ci's brows were furrowed, and there was a hint of forbearance and restraint between his brows. He laughed inwardly. Men should get married when they're of age, and women should get married when they're of age. The two of you are in love with each other. This is truly a golden marriage bestowed by the heavens. Feng Zhen pretended to exaggerate, wishing that he could praise Li Yun and Shangguan Wan to the heavens. Li Yun, an unmarried young lad, blushed and was so embarrassed that he didn't even know where to place his hands. Feng Zhen even said, "Han Mei, listen to me. You only need to run to the Lord and express your sincere and passionate feelings to the person you love. Believe me, no woman in this world can resist such a passionate and unrestrained confession." Li Yun was so embarrassed that he felt as if smoke was about to come out of his head. He had also said implicit words of love to Shangguan Wan before, but he had never said them so bluntly. Who would have thought that Mr. Feng, who appeared to be a debauchee, was actually a passionate person? His petite body hid a bold and unrestrained soul. Li Yun said shyly in a low voice, "Isn't this too offensive? I'm afraid that Lord will despise me and say that I've offended a beauty." Feng Zhen laughed and said, "What are you afraid of? A chaste woman is afraid of a clingy man. She might say you're rude, but who knows how shy and happy she is in her heart." Li Yun was about to nod when he heard Wei Ci reprimand him while suppressing his anger. "How rude, how impudent. Li Yun was stunned. He turned to look at Wei Ci, but all he could see was the other's back as he turned to leave and his wide sleeves fluttering in the wind. This. Mr. Wei, this is. Once a mild-mannered person got angry, the scene was rather frightening. Even though Li Yun was valiant and brave, he was also shocked at this moment. He didn't know how he had angered the other. Feng restrained the emotions in his eyes and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a profound smile. Li Yun muttered, Mr. Wei has always been self-restrained and polite. Mr. Feng's words just now must have displeased him. Indeed, such a solemn event as a marriage proposal should be carried out with respect and not blindly guided by Mr. Feng. Feng Zhen heard Li Yun's mutterings and scoffed lightly. He said, concern leads to confusion. Even he, Wei Zixiao, is no exception. Li Yun continued to be confused, not understanding what Feng Zhen meant. Feng Zhen saw that his brain wasn't working properly and gave him a loving look, as if he was looking at his own silly and adorable son. If you don't understand, then don't think too much. It's useless even if you understand. Since the Lord has already agreed to your marriage with Wan Nyangzi, and Wan Nyangzi has feelings for you, you just need to follow the old tradition of the 3 letters and 6 rites and do it step by step. I'll be waiting to drink your wedding wine. Li Yun was dejected. After going around in circles, Feng Zhen still hadn't come up with any good ideas. After easily dismissing Li Yun, Feng Zhen was so worried that he paced in circles 3 times. Feng Zhen knew that with Wei Ci's brain, even if his IQ went offline, it would only be for a short period of time. Once Wei Ci had time to calm down, he would definitely realize that he had made a mistake. Thinking of this, Feng Zhen hurriedly chased after Wei Ci and shamelessly went to his house. I didn't expect this. Feng Zhen hadn't even entered the main hall, but he was already filled with excitement, as if he had discovered a new continent. Didn't expect what? Wei Ci had been back for a while. He knelt near the table and stared coldly at the boiling tea stove. He already knew that Feng Zhen would come, but he was secretly annoyed at himself for not being patient enough to have such a stupid misunderstanding. I really didn't expect that you, Wei Zixiao, would have such thoughts about your lord. Feng Zhen lightly slapped the table. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make one's heart tremble. When Wei Ci heard this, he suddenly raised his head. His ink-black eyes contained an undisguised sharpness. Sure, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. When did I ever have any disrespectful thoughts about my lord? Feng Zhen had a smile on his face as he sat beside Wei Ci. Just disrespectful thoughts? Feng Zhen wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. It was rare to see Wei Ci being forced into a corner. No matter what, he had to enjoy it. He said aggressively, no matter who it was, when they first heard that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord, the first thought that came to mind was that he wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry Shengguan. But you're different. Your first thought was that Han Mei wanted to propose marriage to my lord and marry her. Do you think it's reasonable to say that you don't have any other thoughts about my lord? Wei Ci opened his mouth. His secret thoughts had been exposed by Feng Zhen, and for a moment, he didn't know how to refute. His glib tongue that flowed like a river didn't have any effect on him at all. Absurd. He could only spit out these 2 words. Feng Zhen, who had been imposing just a moment ago, raised his hand and put it around Wei Ci's shoulder the next second, looking like a good brother. My lord isn't married, and you aren't either. Isn't it normal to have such thoughts? Feng Zhen said. Why are you so secretive about it? Look, you almost scared the little angel Han Mei just now. Wei Ci raised his hand and brushed Feng Zhen's hand away. His expression was dark and solemn, and he looked at Feng Zhen with even more vigor. How can a person like my lord be disrespected so easily? I don't want to hear such words from you again. Ci and my lord are innocent. Chapter 867. Wei Ci said, My lord, you have yet to succeed in your hegemony, you should not be hindered by this kind of love affair. At this moment, Feng Zhen made an inelegant gesture of using his little finger to pick at his ear, directly outsmarting Wei Ci. Did you hear that right? According to Zixiao's meaning, doesn't that mean that the Lord and you are a couple and have an affair? Feng Zhen looked as if he had discovered a new continent. He said, just now, I only said that you secretly admired the Lord, but I never said how the Lord reacted to you. Why is it that you and the Lord are in love with each other? Could it be that there's more to it? Wei Xi's face paled. He realized in hindsight that he had been tricked by Feng Zhen and was furious. If not for his good upbringing, he would have long lost control of his impulse and kicked Feng Zhen out of the house. You have a beautiful face and a charming body. You deserve to be loved by others. For example, Xinhua, don't you have many women in your boudoir? There was a hint of slyness in Feng Zhen's eyes as he admired Wei Xi's fairy-like face with great interest, revealing the annoyance and shame that only a mortal man could have. He continued, my lord is not an ordinary woman, but she is also a person of flesh and blood. Outstanding women were chased by men, and outstanding men were chased by women. This was a matter of course. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Taking advantage of the fact that no one has an advantage over you, it's better to make a move early than later when she has her eyes on someone else. The only thing is that I'm afraid only you can marry a woman like Lord Wei Xi. After a while, Wei Xi squeezed his molars and squeezed out a sentence. Prodigal Feng Zhen, your words and actions really live up to your nickname. When Wei Xi flared up, Li Yun would be frightened, but not Feng Zhen. I'm just teasing you. Why are you so serious? Feng Zhen curled his lips in an unrefined manner. He said, my lord is currently 18 years old. In another 2 years, he should be thinking about marriage. Do you really think that she is an immortal banished from the heavens, living in the wind, eating and drinking dew, with no distractions in her heart and no emotions? Taking 10,000 steps back, Zixiao had placed his lord on a pedestal, but had he ever thought of an heir? I will have to face this problem one day. As an outsider, Feng Zhen naturally saw things more clearly than Wei Xi. He could also tell that Wei Xi did not treat Jiang Pengji as his lord. He clearly worshipped her as a god. Who knew that the gods in Wei Xi's eyes were ultimately just mortals with flesh and blood? Feng Zhen's words calmed Wei Xi's raging flames for a while. Carrying on the family line is a common human thing, Wei Xi said dejectedly. I have never had any improper thoughts towards my lord. It was Feng Zhen's turn to be confused. Adoration was adoration, what was there to avoid about it? Wei Xi was about to drown in a jar of vinegar over the blunder just now, but now he refused to admit it. How was this a man who was so bashful? She was clearly a little princess. Feng Zhen said angrily, I really don't know what you're conflicted about. He said to Feng Zhen, there are some things you won't understand until the time comes. With his previous life's experience, Wei Xi knew that this matter was not as simple as love between a man and a woman. It involved many entanglements of interests. If his lord was not the final victor and was destined to fail, what was wrong with Wei Xi going all out and confessing his feelings? But he knew that was impossible. His lord would definitely win, and she would create an unprecedented golden age for all the people in the world. Wei Xi did not want to be a stain on her reputation and give those gossipy people a reason to attack her. If possible, he hoped that he could stand by her side and quietly sweep away the pebbles for her, so that she could walk more steadily. Feng Zhen wanted to tease him a little more, but he saw Wei Xi's deep frown. The pain on his face did not seem fake, so he could only stop. He was a prodigal son. How could he understand the principle that the more Wei Xi liked and admired, the more he dared not approach? It won't be you. It will always be someone else. Feng Zhen folded his hands into his sleeves. Every word he said was like a knife stabbing into Wei Xi's heart. Just now, Han Mei only made a slip of the tongue, and you're already so jealous. When the nightmare comes true, tsk, Feng Zhen added, why can't you understand? Wei Xi responded with silence. The prodigal son said, I don't understand what you're worried about, but if you think about it carefully, I guess I can guess a thing or two. You're just worried about the gossip of others and the fight for the heirs in the future? It's not difficult to talk about it. Why don't you just change your surname and marry into her family? Wei Ci was speechless. To prevent Fengzhen from going too far, Wei Ci could not bear it anymore and said, "It's not just that." Fengzhen asked, "Then what is it?" Wei Ci rubbed his brows and said, "Do you think it's possible for my lord to become the emperor?" Fengzhen thought for a while and said, "If she can successfully get rid of the calamity of the northern borderline, my lord will be able to add 9 pebbles and become her own emperor. If she could conquer the northern borderline, plus half of Dongqing's territory, it would not be too much to make her own emperor." Wei Ci asked again, "If a woman becomes the emperor, will her husband be the ruler?" Fengzhen instinctively wanted to reply, "Ridiculous," but he suddenly paused. Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, "If her husband is the ruler, it will undoubtedly be the ruling family of the Empress. The country will not rule the country, and the so-called emperor will become a joke. The important officials of the court can tolerate one empress, but can they tolerate 2 or even 3? If the throne is passed to a prince, the fight between the empress relatives will become more and more intense. As you can see, the aristocratic families are at their peak and have military power in their hands. If a male emperor ascends the throne, the harem will become a channel for the aristocratic families to control the emperor. No matter what they do, it will be wrong. It's still a little far to talk about this now, but it will have to be faced eventually." Fengzhen was stunned. He really did not think so much. "Wait, according to what you're saying, is it better to let my lord be childless for the rest of her life? Or should I say, when my lord conquers the world, she will then adopt her brother's son and forcibly hand over the world? How is that possible?" Wei Ci's eyes were cold and he said, "Getting rid of the father and keeping the son is the best way." After hearing this, Fengzhen's eyelids twitched violently. Wei Ci said, "Forget it, why talk about such a distant matter? If you have nothing else, go home as soon as possible." Wei Ci felt that standing in front of him was an eyesore. Fengzhen could hear the disdain in Wei Ci's words, but he still shamelessly stayed, thinking about what Wei Ci had said earlier. If my lord could really aspire to the throne, having children would indeed be a problem. In addition, Wei Ci's words also mentioned the problem of the aristocratic families. Nowadays, there were many aristocratic families with armies. It would be fine in troubled times, but if the world gradually moved towards unification, it would become a hidden danger of division again. With my lord's temperament, how could she like to be held back by others? Either she would completely weaken the aristocratic families, or they would retaliate and turn them into mere puppets. The interests of the two were completely opposite, and there was almost no possibility of reconciliation. Fengzhen frowned and thought of many hypotheses. Wei Ci, who was beside him, had already calmed down. He took down the teapot on the tea stove and showed off his tea skills. Chapter 868. Fengzhen, who had been tricked by Wei Ci, pondered for a long time but still had no clue. Wei Ci even kindly made him a cup of tea. "Thank you," Fengzhen thanked him as he accepted it. Just as his lips touched the rim of the cup, he suddenly realized that it was not right. He had almost been fooled by Wei Zixiao. She looked up and saw Wei Ci's frowning eyebrows. His eyes, which seemed to be painted black, flickered with a dense gloominess. Seeing this, Fengzhen's heart softened. He swallowed the words that were stuck in his throat and did not continue to make things difficult for Wei Ci. "I'm tired, so I decided to stay in your residence for a while." Fengzhen's eyes turned as another idea popped into his mind. He said shamelessly, "In the past, you and I used to sleep together and talk through the night about world affairs. Now that I think about it, it's been so long." Wei Ci glanced at him out of the corner of his eye and said, "There are still guest rooms in the residence that are empty." It was not that Wei Ci was stingy, but Fengzhen's sleeping posture was comparable to Lu Zhang's. He was also someone who slept from the head of the bed to the end. Fengzhen was small and weak, but he was very thick-skinned. He coaxed and pestered his way to Wei Ci's master bedroom. While Wei Ci was taking a shower, he unrestrained took off his clothes, leaving only his pajamas on, and hurriedly rolled into the bed. Wei Ci was a bit of a neat freak. The bed was regularly washed and changed. Even in this sweaty weather, the bed was still clean and tidy, emitting a fresh and natural fragrance. No matter what, it was much better than Fengzhen's doghole-like bedroom. By the time Wei Xi washed up and was ready to sleep, Fengzhen had already fallen asleep with his limbs spread out. His clothes were slightly open and his hair was messy. He was sprawled out, taking up most of the space. The weather was still hot and it was easy to sweat. Fengzhen did not even take a shower and just rolled onto his bed. Wei Xi thought to himself that when Fengzhen woke up, he would definitely wash this mattress 3 to 5 times. Wei Xi was wearing white pajamas and lay on his side on the other side of the bed. Drowsiness overwhelmed him and his consciousness slowly drifted into dreamland. At this moment, Fengzhen deliberately lowered his voice and asked, Zixiao? Zixiao? Are you still awake? Wei Xi struggled to open his eyes and answered vaguely, what is it? Fengzhen said, speaking of sleeping together, I suddenly thought of something. You and the Lord seem to have once shared the same bed and slept together. Wei Xi narrowed his eyes as he listened, but he was highly vigilant about anything related to Jianghu. When he understood the content of Fengzhen's question, he was so shocked that his entire body quivered, and all his sleepiness was gone. Feng Zisher, if you don't want to sleep, you should go back to your house earlier. Fengzhen supported his cheek with one hand and turned sideways to look at Wei Xi. That flawless, jade-like face was now filled with complicated emotions. There was embarrassment and shock, as well as the fear of having his secret exposed. It had to be said that this greatly satisfied Fengzhen's bad taste. No. I'm not leaving. Fengzhen shamelessly crawled onto the bed and hugged the pillow with both hands. Suddenly, his fingertips touched a roll of something. He reached out and carefully touched it, taking out the scroll. It was actually a scroll that had been carefully put away by someone. Without waiting for him to react, Wei Xi's expression changed again, and he uncharacteristically pounced on him. Fengzhen instinctively dodged and avoided Wei Xi. Relying on his agility, he ran away with the scroll. He didn't want to open the scroll, but Wei Xi's reaction was too abnormal. TSK. The precious thing on the bedside, could it be the fire-repelling painting that you usually look at for fun? Fengzhen escaped quickly and opened the painting quickly. Wei Xi was afraid to take action, so he couldn't catch up to him. Feng Zisher. Wei Xi was so angry that he took the long sword by the side of the bed and unsheathed it. Fengzhen was so frightened that his hair stood on end. Was he serious? Fengzhen quickly glanced at the contents of the painting. When he saw it clearly, he looked at Wei Xi with a strange expression. There was no other reason. The woman in the painting was none other than Jianghu. The woman in the painting was sleeping on a flower. The strokes were exquisite and realistic. It was completely different from the current freehand brushwork. This painting was more realistic. The woman's eyelashes were long and slender. Her eyelids trembled slightly, as if she was about to open her tipsy eyes and reveal a pair of clear, watery eyes. That wasn't all, but the woman in the painting was dressed very boldly. It was completely different from the current conservative creative style. Her sleeves were narrow, revealing 2 snow-white wrists. The hem of her skirt was huge, as gorgeous as a blooming peony. In comparison, the hem of her skirt was a little short. It only covered her calves, revealing 2 slender feet. 2 silver rings with bells hung on her slender ankles. The woman was sleeping soundly on the ground because she was drunk. Her sleeping petals were scattered around, making the white look whiter and the red redder. The surrounding rockery overlapped, and the environment was remote and quiet. Here, there was such a breathtaking scene, as if he had seen it with his own eyes. Fengzhen glanced at the time of the inscription and raised his eyebrows fearlessly. My lord was only 12 years old at that time, and you already had so many thoughts? The date of the painting was 6 years ago, the first month after Wei Xi's rebirth. At that time, the beauty was sleeping and in full bloom. Wei Xi saw the fallen petals all over the ground. Memories of the past flashed before his eyes. He couldn't bear it and drew. Now that he thought about it, he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. Feng Zhen had always been someone who couldn't keep his mouth shut. It was hard to say when he would reveal a word or two to his lord. Although Wei Si's disguise had long been stripped bare in front of Jianghu, he still harbored some hope. Take it back. Wei Si pointed his sword at Feng Zhen, feeling even more anxious. Although Feng Zhen wasn't afraid of death, he understood the principle of moderation. He couldn't force Wei Si into a corner. Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, not to mention that Wei Si's swordsmanship wasn't bad. Fine, I'll return it to you. Feng Zhen didn't dare to throw the painting over. Instead, he rolled it up and handed it back to Wei Si. However, he said, I've never seen anyone more hesitant than you. You were still denying it just now. Now that the evidence is irrefutable, I don't know what else you can say. Not only did he draw such a painting in private, he even hid it next to the pillow in the master bedroom. What was he thinking? Did he even need to analyze it? Wei Si sheathed the sword in his hand, but the gloominess on his face didn't dissipate. Feng Zhen suddenly asked with a smile, Are you afraid of death? Wei Si had just said that getting rid of the father and keeping the son was the best solution. Now that he was pleased with his lord, he couldn't help but think too much. Of course, Feng Zhen knew Wei Si's temperament. It was impossible for him to be afraid of death. Feng Zhen calmly prepared to listen to Wei Si's explanation. Looking at his embarrassed expression, he didn't expect Wei Si to look absent-minded. If I was afraid, I wouldn't have killed myself back then. Wei Si barely managed to shut his mouth and did not manage to say the last word, kill. Otherwise, with Feng Zhen's ability to cause trouble, wouldn't he get to the bottom of it? Feng Zhen saw that the alarm had been lifted and immediately became fearless. Chapter 869. If he wasn't even afraid of death, what else was there to be afraid of? Wei Si was distracted by Feng Zhen. He was a little tempted, but he suppressed it with his rationality. It's still too early. Feng Lingzi found out about this. Wei Si was mentally prepared for it to be widely publicized. Now that the Lord's hegemony has just taken off, it's really not appropriate to consider personal relationships. If others know about this, not only will the outside world be talking about it, but I'm afraid the Lord's strategists and generals will also have other thoughts. Wei Si couldn't help but warn Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen was in a particularly good mood now that he had something on Wei Si. Is it that serious? Knowing that Feng Zhen was deliberately playing dumb, Wei Si still had to explain patiently. It's much more serious than that. The human heart was sinister, and they were not stingy with using the most despicable and sinister thoughts to speculate about others. Most of the people were ignorant. Once someone took the lead, it wouldn't take long for the affairs of the Lord and her subordinates to be spread everywhere. Open your mouth to start a rumor, but run your legs to refute it. Wei Si could totally imagine how embarrassing the unofficial history would be and how nasty the people would say it. This was just the outside world. Wanzhou would also be in turmoil because of this. Wei Si being roasted on the fire was secondary. He was afraid that some people would be indignant and think that Jianghu always gave Wei Si preferential treatment. Once people had such thoughts, there would be more conflicts, and the people's hearts would be scattered. The power in Wanzhou would no longer be united and stable as before. After his rebirth, Wei Si analyzed his past life many times from the perspective of an outsider. Each time, he made different discoveries and comprehensions. In his past life, the Lord treated her subordinates fairly, rewarded and punished appropriately, and was clear about rewards and punishments. This was one of her strengths. If he wanted to strive for the throne again, this advantage had to be continued. Feng Zhen said tactfully, Zixiao, you don't trust me? Tell me what you can, and never reveal a word about what you can't. Wei Si snorted. Of course, he knew that Feng Zhen seemed to be unrestrained, but he was actually very careful. I hope so. Feng Zhen said to Wei Si, I've always felt that something was wrong. Although you didn't say anything, I always felt that you had a lot on your mind. You're sensitive and thoughtful. This is both your strength and your weakness. If there's something that's hard to say, you can tell me. Why do you have to suffer? No matter what sorrowful things were, once they were spoken, they would feel carefree. Wei Ci sneered coldly. If he were to treat Fengjin as someone he could confide in, wouldn't the other party be able to grasp hold of his weaknesses? If Fengjin threatened him with this and asked him to cover for him, help him skip work, secretly drink, and visit brothels, what should he do? Don't think that Fengjin wouldn't do something like that. Wei Ci knew very well what kind of unreliable things Feng Lingzi had done in his previous life. He bullied Li Yun, Dian Yan and the other generals, who were all honest people. He cheated them of their salary to buy wine and often skipped work. His crimes were too numerous to list. Happiness should be enjoyed in time. How can it be delayed? Fengjin said. When people live to 100 years old, what they seek is to be free and unfettered, to enjoy themselves in the moment. Therefore, he could not understand why Wei Ci was so cautious and indecisive, hoping to have the best of both worlds, but in the end, he could not get anything good from either end. He who is sensitive and thinks too much will not live long. Perhaps there were more inside stories that he did not know, but from what Fengjin could see, if Wei Ci continued on like this, he would only hurt himself and others. No, not necessarily hurting others, but definitely hurting oneself. He rolled up the blanket and went to sleep, leaving Wei Ci stunned on the spot with a thoughtful look on his face. On the other side, Li Yun also obediently hired an iceman to hunt a pair of wild geese. The 3 letters and 6 rights were all there. Due to the special circumstances, the whole process only took about half a month. Qing Jing completed the task that Huang Song had given him perfectly. He had quietly returned with a secret letter from Jiang Pengji and did not attend the wedding. Although time was tight, Jiang Pengji did not mistreat Sheng Wanwan. Everything that needed to be prepared had been prepared for her. It was as if she was marrying her younger sister. Speaking of marrying her younger sister, Jiang Pengji was also experienced. She only cared about the overall situation, and the other details would be taken care of by others. A few days before the wedding, the smile on Li Yun's face never disappeared. Not only did he walk with the wind, but he also floated. However, Sheng Wanwan was perturbed and restless. She always felt that everything now was beautiful like an illusory dream. Once this dream was pierced, she would be beaten back to the cruel reality and continue to be a widow who was tortured by others and could not see a future. In the words of the live stream's audience, this was called premarital anxiety. Jiang Pengji was busy with work, so she could only entrust Hui Jun to help her ease Sheng Wanwan's worries, so that Wan would not overthink things. Huijuan's thoughts were exquisite and incisive. Every sentence she said hit the nail on Sheng Wanwan's head, and the knot in her heart was easily resolved. Under the anxious anticipation of the 2 newlyweds, the day of the wedding finally arrived. As the first bachelor in the Wanzhou group to get rid of a single partner, Li Yun was not only handsome and likable, but he was also popular, so basically all the colleagues who could attend were present. Feng Jin's wife, Wei Jingxian, even played the role of a blessed wife and helped Sheng Wanwan wring her face. Sister Jingxian, I'm a little nervous. Sheng Wanwan was no longer that immature girl. The last time she got married, she felt that she was not attending a wedding, but her own funeral. But today, her little heart was thumping uncontrollably, making her feel helpless and flustered. Today is the wedding, so you can't speak carelessly, Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Forget everything that happened in the past. Sheng Wanwan was still nervous. She involuntarily clenched her hands under her wide sleeves, leaving shallow fingernail marks on her palms. Li Yun came to fetch the bride on time, and the smile on his face became even more radiant. His life goals were very simple: to take care of his master, marry a wife, and have children. Now that he had both, he was naturally beaming with happiness, smiling so widely that only his teeth could be seen. Feng Jin's Changsheng and Feng Jin's Feng Yi became virgins. Changsheng was still young, so she happily rolled around on the bed in the bridal room a few times. Feng Jin's only son, Feng Yi, on the other hand, kept a straight face and silently sat on the bedding. He stayed for a while symbolically before coming down. Feng Yi was the child of Feng Zhen's deceased wife. His appearance was like Feng Zhen's, but his temperament was like his mother's, extremely reserved. Because he was born prematurely, Feng Yi was slightly weaker than Feng Zhen and rarely appeared in front of others. When the crowd saw Feng Yi, they were so shocked that they forgot how to speak. A guy like Feng Zhen, who had no boundaries, actually gave birth to a serious and refined son. It was a genetic mutation. "Hello, uncles." Feng Yi bowed obediently. At such a young age, he already had the demeanor of a gentleman. "Today is Uncle Hanmei's big day. You don't have to be so formal." Feng Zhen caressed his son's hair and casually dismissed him. He had no choice. With his own son by his side, he couldn't drink to his heart's content. You have to have the demeanor of an elder brother. Don't bully the weak. Feng Yi looked frail, but his demeanor was excellent. He really lived up to the name Feng Zhen had given him. The crowd was dumbfounded. They thought that a prodigal son like Feng Zhen would give birth to a son who was extremely daring and dared to dance on his grave. But what happened? Good bamboo shoots come from evil bamboo. Feng Zhen's face immediately darkened. Who was he calling an evil bamboo? Wanzhou was extraordinarily lively, but elsewhere, the atmosphere was extremely solemn. You don't like it? Lu Shi held a letter in his hand. It had been sent urgently by someone from Jianghu half a month ago. In front of him knelt a handsome young man of about 13 or 14 years old. His facial features were somewhat similar to Jianghu's. Your son wouldn't dare. That's good, Lu Shi said. He picked up his pen and wrote a word at the end of the letter. Chapter 870. Today was Han Mei's wedding day. Jianghu released a notice a few days in advance. The viewers on the red bullet screen were already rubbing their palms and rubbing their hands. They displayed the super-fast hand speed that they had gained from being single for more than 20 years. Under the mad scramble, the ratio between red and blue reached 24:1. There was a total of 816,000 viewers in the 850,000 live stream channel. Even so, there were still quite a number of red bullet screen viewers who complained about the blue bullet screen. When Su Ku and Xuanmei got married, Jianghu was only a level 4 streamer, and the upper limit of her streaming room was only 150,000 viewers. When it was Li Yun and Sheng Wanwan's turn to get married, Jianghu was already a level 6 streamer. The upper limit of her streaming room had reached 850,000 viewers. One could totally imagine how crazy the rewards on this day were. Not to mention the small rewards, the large rewards that were announced in the live broadcast room were even more explosive. They filled every corner of the live broadcast screen and did not stop for a long time. If the audience did not block the reward effects, they would not be able to see the live stream at all. The blue bullet screen viewers were so shocked by such a grand occasion that they could not close their mouths. It was a wedding between two people who had nothing to do with each other, yet they did not broadcast the actual scene of the bridal chamber. What were these lunatics so happy about? The viewers in the red bullet screen indicated that they were willing. Jinyang Wenv, I'm heartbroken. My husband is going to marry another woman, and I still have to give him a wedding gift. How miserable. After sending this bullet comment, the nouveau riche waved his hand and threw out 99 luxurious private helicopters. Zigai Dongdongzui, I'm different from you sluts. I'm marrying my son. As soon as the bullet comments were sent, a similarly generous tip was sent out, with a thoughtful message. This is the dowry for the little angel, Han Mei. Li Yun's beauty value was high, her temper was good, and her personality was contrasting with her cuteness. She fiercely poked the cuteness points of the girlfriend fans and mother fans. What was even more frightening was that these people were not only willful, they were also filthy rich. Apart from the earthquake in Shangjing, Jianghu had never taken the initiative to ask for rewards from the audience. As a result, over the years, many viewers complained that they had nowhere to spend the money in their pockets. Now that he finally had a legitimate opportunity to throw money around, why wouldn't he give it his all? They also wanted to let the other live streams know that their live stream also had a local tycoon. Lo Siji Lianmeng, in the blink of an eye, even the single dog Li Yun is married. Streamer, are you still not considering pushing beauty CI? Soon after, countless bullet screens copied this sentence. Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh when the screen was full of messages urging her to get married. Host V, the frog isn't cooked yet. I'll tell you the good news when it's cooked. Jiang Pengji watched as the MC presided over the wedding ceremony while she chatted with the audience in the streaming room. She chose the topics that she was more interested in to answer. Sinyusi, host, you've received so many tips today. Aren't you going to consider giving Han Mei, the little angel, a raise? Host V, of course I'll get a raise. I converted some of it into gold and silver for Wan Er's dowry. I even wrapped a big red envelope for Han Mei. Jiang Pengji rarely interacted with the audience. Seeing that she was in a good mood that day, many people in the streaming room spoke up enthusiastically. Hallelujah, by the way, today is Angel Han Mei's wedding. As the host, you can't just increase your salary. Host V, that's true, so I've prepared another super big gift pack. It's definitely a surprise. Jiang Pengji smiled mysteriously. The salted fish's curiosity was piqued. However, she kept them guessing and refused to divulge any information. The wedding this time was very different from the weddings that the audience had in mind. The most obvious difference was that the bride did not have to wait in the bridal chamber. They could change into wedding clothes and socialize with the guests together with their husbands. Jiang Pengji was chatting privately with the audience when two newlyweds came to her and toasted. Looking at the joyful Li Yun and the bashful Sheng Wanwan, she suddenly had the illusion that she was marrying off her daughter after her son was married. After drinking the wine, Jiang Pengji suddenly said, I've sent a special gift to both of your residences. You can open it tomorrow and have a look. Remember, you can't look at it today. That thing. It's a little inauspicious. I'm afraid it'll spoil your happiness. Li Yun and Sheng Wanwan were puzzled, but Jiang Pengji had specifically instructed them not to deliberately disobey. Because Li Yun's alcohol tolerance was not very good, his colleagues did not make things too difficult for him. At least he could stagger into the bridal chamber and not pass out drunk, leaving the bride to guard the bridal chamber alone. Sheng Wanwan and the maidservant supported Li Yun to the bridal chamber. Changsheng, who was fooling around at the side, saw it and wanted to join in on the fun with her short legs. A gentleman should not look at indecent things. Feng Yi laboriously carried her back and placed her beside Qiguan Rang's daughter. Although Changsheng was not young, her weight was not light. In just a few steps, Feng Yi was so tired that he was panting slightly. Why? Feng Yi said matter-of-factly, because I'm a gentleman. Compared to the lively and active Changsheng, Qiguan Rang's daughter was much quieter. She did not like to speak and was a little shy. What is a gentleman? Changsheng could speak coherently now, but her pronunciation was not very clear. Not doing things that should not be done. Feng Yi lifted his eyelids slightly and glanced at Changsheng's plump and fleshy face. He wanted to pinch it, but he restrained himself. Feng Zhen, who was standing at the side, could tell what his son was thinking. He pinched Changsheng's cheeks in front of his son, causing Feng Yi to widen his eyes. There was some rebuke in his eyes. Take good care of the two little sisters. Feng Zhen was satisfied to see the change in his son's expression. It was much livelier than before. Wei Ci saw the interaction between the father and son and shook his head in amusement. After laughing, there was some worry in the bottom of his eyes. If he remembered correctly, Feng Zhen's only son, Feng Yi, died before he was 10. Speaking of the reason for Feng Yi's premature death, it was rather sad. At that time, Feng Zhen was already in his 30s. He listened to the instigation of others and mistakenly believed that hanshi powder had the effect of strengthening the body and bones. One time, the powder acted up and was accidentally seen by Feng Yi. Feng Yi was young and did not understand. He thought that Feng Zhen was seriously ill and was at death's door. He panicked and hurriedly went to find a doctor. Who knew that the ground was covered with dense moss? When Feng Yi ran, he accidentally fell and slid into the pond in the courtyard. Feng Yi was a premature baby and his physique was much weaker than his father's. It was still early spring then. The cold wind blew and the pond water was bone-chilling. Feng Yi suddenly fell into the water and naturally fell sick. The illness went deep into his lungs. In less than 2 days, he died prematurely. Now, Feng Zhen had already quit using hanshi powder. Maybe Feng Yi could grow up smoothly. However, if Feng Yi grew up smoothly, would Feng Zhen still have the idea of remarrying and giving birth to Feng Yu with the second wife? Without Feng Yu, wouldn't there be one less trustworthy person to assist Jiang Yan? Speaking of which, Feng Yu could be considered his son-in-law in his previous life. Perhaps he had too much to drink, Wei Ci muttered something. It was coincidentally heard by Feng Zhen who had sharp ears. What Feng Yu? Wei Ci was already 80 to 90% drunk. He said, "Don't let your Feng Yu harm my Yan, Feng Zhen laughed. Who is Feng Yu? Who is Yan, Wei Ci said, your son, my daughter. Feng Zhen. Chapter 871. TSK, daydreaming isn't considered a skill. If you're really capable, you should express your feelings to the Lord. Feng Zhen shook his head and pushed the drunk Wei Ci to the side, continuing to drink with the others. On the other side, the newlyweds in the bridal room were so nervous that their palms were sweating. The two of them drank the nuptial wine, not daring to look at each other for a long time, as if one more look would set them on fire. Shang Wanwan stammered to find a topic, suddenly remembering Jiang Pengji's mysterious gift. Li Yin's mind was filled with thoughts of his sweetheart. How would he have the time to be curious about the guest's gift? Wan, it's getting late, why don't we rest early? Every minute of the night was worth 1,000 pieces of gold, it couldn't be wasted. Okay. Her voice was like the buzz of a mosquito, as light as a swan feather, but it was heavenly music to Li Yin's ears. He couldn't help but carry her in his arms. Not long after, unbearable panting could be heard in the dimly lit bridal room. The next day, the bride served tea. Looking at his married son, Xie Qian's heart was filled with emotions. Jiang Pengji considerately gave the young couple a wedding leave, letting them be lovey-dovey. Shang Wanwan was still thinking about the mysterious gift Jiang Pengji mentioned, and Li Yin was happy to open the gift with her. Is this the gift from Lanting? Shang Wanwan looked at the square box in front of her. It was the size of 2 men's palms. Look at the stick on it, this should be the gift the Lord mentioned. Open it and take a look. Li Yin smiled as he opened the gift. When he opened the box and saw what was inside, the two newlyweds turned pale. Shang Wanwan was so shocked that she took half a step back. There was nothing else in the box, only an urn made of cinerary ash. A newlywed's giving an urn? This is definitely not Lanting's doing. Shang Wanwan snapped out of her trance and said firmly, who packed the gift yesterday? Someone must have changed Brother Lanting's gift to create a rift between Han Mei and the Lord. Li Yin's joy faded slightly. He hesitated for a moment, then lifted his hand to open the urn's lid. It was filled with white powder. He moved closer to smell it. It was indeed human ashes and not powder of similar color. Who was so evil? Han Mei, there's a note here. The paper was made of high-quality Xian paper. Most of the improved paper was supplied to Qing Cheng's bookstore, and the rest was supplied to the district headquarters. Li Yin was reminded by Shang Wanwan. He raised his hand to stop his newlywed wife from touching the unlucky ashes of a stranger. He stretched out 2 fingers, picked up the slip of paper, and slowly unfolded it. This is Lanting's handwriting. Shang Wanwan worked as a clerk in the district headquarters, so she was very familiar with Jiang Pengji's handwriting. She read out the words on the note. This is the ashes of the evildoer from Zhongzhou, who killed Han Mei's mother. Today, I present it to congratulate you on your wedding. Shang Wanwan was taken aback. She looked up at Li Yun. His young and handsome face was full of forbearance and restraint, only his eyes were slightly red. Hanmei? As if awakened from a dream, Li Yun hurriedly covered the urn and carried it to look for Xia Qian. Xia Qian was still in a daze in the main hall, reminiscing about his late wife. If it weren't for that evildoer's possession, perhaps today, his deceased wife would also be able to drink the tea served by the new bride. Just as he was feeling sad, his mischievous child ran over in a hurry, carrying a urn of ashes. Xia Qian's expression was unbearable. This mischievous child, of all things, was he playing with an urn of ashes? Who did he want to curse to die? Before Xia Qian could react, Li Yun carried the urn of ashes and knelt down in front of him. What is this? Xia Qian felt like he was about to have a stroke. He was infuriated by his mischievous child. Father, the Lord said that this is the enemy who killed my birth mother. What? Xia Qian couldn't react for a moment. His expression changed, but his brain couldn't react at all. Suddenly, Xia Qian thought of the yin-yang jade pendant that Jiang Pengji had borrowed for 2 days. He didn't know what to feel. He hoped that the ashes belonged to that evildoer, but he was also suspicious of the truth. Xia Qian couldn't be blamed for his suspicions. No matter who it was, everyone would have their suspicions. The enemy who had been gnashing his teeth for close to 20 years was killed so easily. Hanmei, put it away. Father wants to go and ask about it. If it's true, your mother's spirit in heaven can rest in peace. Li Yun nodded heavily. Xia Qian hurriedly went to look for Jiang Pengji. She seemed to be prepared and wasn't surprised by his arrival. That evildoer was really executed? Xia Qian couldn't believe it. The hatred that had been in his heart for so many years was easily resolved. Jiang Pengji said, "Of course it's true. I'll tell you about that evildoer's appearance and characteristics, then you'll know if it's true or not." She had a very good memory. Not to mention people she had met several times, even if she had only seen them once, she could still describe the person's appearance and characteristics. Xia Qian became more agitated as he listened. In the end, he fell to the ground and burst into tears, unable to control himself. Jiang Pengji waited for Xia Qian's emotions to calm down, then said hesitantly, "There's something that's hard to say." Xia Qian's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and said, "Magistrate Lu, please say it. If there's anything I can help with, Xia Shaohe is willing to go through water and tread on fire for you. It's not a big deal. It's just that this jade pendant is of some use to me. I wonder if you're willing to part with it." Previously, she said she would borrow it for 2 days, but she shamelessly borrowed it for half a month. Luckily, Xia Qian didn't ask for it from her. Xia Qian thought it was something big. To Xia Qian, this jade pendant was a locator to locate his enemy. Now that his enemy had been reduced to ashes, the yin-yang jade pendant had no other use for him. Jiang Pengji asked him for this useless jade pendant. Of course, he wouldn't refuse. "Thank you. This thing is of great use to me." As for what use it was, Jiang Pengji didn't reveal anything to Xia Qian. As a considerate lord, Jiang Pengji gave Li Yun and his wife half a month off from their wedding. It wasn't until Chongzhou sent an urgent letter that she summoned Li Yun and Sheng Guanwan back. At that moment, Wei Xi had already returned to Shangjing to continue supervising the construction of the provincial government. Jiang Pengji summoned all the people who were left behind to the government office and announced something to them. Father plans to retire behind the scenes. I'll take over Chongzhou and Hu County. When Qiguan Rang heard this, he stopped waving his feather fan. His lord's efficiency was indescribable, but he looked around and couldn't bear to look straight at the scene. He moved his feather fan higher and blocked his eyes. The group of military officials looked confused. They couldn't react to what had happened. The rest of the civil officials looked as if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. Oh my God! Someone's going to die. They already felt that they were too busy to manage such a large Wanzhou. It wasn't easy for everything to be on the right track, and the Lord's territory had suddenly expanded. There was an extreme lack of capable people. Especially Yang Si. He felt his vision go black and his soul almost left his body. She had finally finished her official duties in other places and wanted to come back for a breather. She was stunned by the news before she could even sit down. "Why, is it so sudden?" Jiang Pengji said, "It's better to be prepared in advance." Their opponent was the north borderline. If they didn't make preparations, sooner or later they would fail miserably. Yang Si said with some difficulty, "But Chongzhou and Hu County? I'm afraid it won't be easy to intervene." Lu Shi had managed Chongzhou for 4 to 5 years and Hu County for more than 10 years. The people under him might not be willing to listen to Jiang Pengji. "Even if it's not easy to intervene, we have to intervene. Whoever dares to resist, will just find a reason to get rid of them." Jiang Pengji's gaze was somewhat fierce. There was no second person who would dare to take the lead in resisting and looking for trouble. Chapter 872. He felt a toothache. How did he end up with such a lord? RH grumbled in his heart, but did not show it on his face. RH stepped forward and said, "My lord, if that's the case, I'm afraid it will put you in a difficult position, R.O.? What's so difficult about it for me?" Yang Si said helplessly, "The old master has been in Chongzhou for many years. Hu County was managed by him. The former is still manageable, but the latter are probably the old master's trusted subordinates. These two places have their own rules. If we interfere decisively, those old men will take advantage of their seniority and bring this matter to the old master. Won't we drive a wedge between the lord and the old master?" Lu Shi was willing to step back, but it did not mean that he had completely disappeared from the face of the earth. Would the old men who had followed Lu Shi by Jiang Pengji's account and not secretly trip her up? If this problem was not solved, no matter how good the father-daughter relationship was, it would not be able to withstand the discord and instigation. Sooner or later, there would be trouble. Since ancient times, how many fathers and sons did not get along and brothers fought each other? Jiang Pengji lifted her eyelids and said, "Father has already stepped back. All the matters of Chongzhou and Hu County are decided by me. Those old men want to take advantage of their seniority in front of me. Even father can't protect them. I will make things clear to father." Yang Si heaved a sigh of relief and said, "That's good." Jiang Pengji asked around, "Are there any other questions?" Everyone did not speak. It was obvious that there were no objections. They knew very well that they would have to fight with the north borderline sooner or later. If the lord was willing to plan early, it was better than making a last-minute effort. The generals were already in a daze. Their slow brains finally connected with the others and they were secretly delighted. In their opinion, the lord would take over the power of Chongzhou and Hu County. The busiest people would definitely be civil servants. Little did they know that working overtime was a group activity. No one could escape. After a while, Jiang Pengji said to the crowd, "I don't have any objections for now. Take a look at this." She gestured to Wanner. Wanner got the order and stood up with a smile. She distributed several booklets to everyone. Shengguanwan was not only the administrator of the women's department of the government office, but she was also the female teacher of Wanzhou Academy. Ever since Xie Qian had fled from Zhongzhou to Wanzhou with Wan Xian, Jiang Pengji had abducted this great scholar of Zhongzhou to enlighten the students of the academy. In order to take over Shengguanwan's teaching job, she selected someone from the women's department of the government office and asked her to teach the female students of the academy. After the divorce, not only did Li Yun return to work, even Shengguanwan returned to the government office and became Jiang Pengji's assistant. Li Yun anxiously watched as his wife walked in front of him and handed him a booklet bound with fine thread. He reached out to take it and secretly stroked Shengguanwan's delicate and soft hand with his fingers. His heart fluttered, but unfortunately, he was woken up by her slap. You're not serious." Shengguanwan muttered softly. Li Yun felt wronged. Ignoring this interlude, Shengguanwan distributed everyone's booklets, then returned to her original position and sat up straight. He tilted his head and asked Li Yun, "Han Mei, what's written here?" Everyone's level of education was different, but Dian Yan was completely illiterate. Li Yun looked at Dian Yan's booklet, then looked at his own booklet. Strangely, he found that the contents of the booklets were exactly the same. The so-called exactly the same was not only the content of the words, but even the size, shape, and horizontal and vertical strokes of each word were the same. Even he noticed this problem, not to mention the other meticulous strategists. Among them, some already knew the reason, such as Qiguan Rang and Su Ku, while others were full of doubts. Jiangpengji said, I know what all of you are doubtful about. We'll talk about this later, everyone. Do you know what was the most hateful thing? She refused to continue halfway through her sentence. Everyone could only suppress their curiosity and carefully read the contents of the booklet. Judging from the handwriting, this was their lord's handwriting. From today onwards to the war at the north borderline, the contents are the difficult problems that we will have to overcome in the next few years. In order for you to have a clearer and more intuitive understanding, I've listed them one by one according to the major and minor items, Jiangpengji said. The three major items are governance, farming, and training the troops. Let's talk about governance first. Everyone present is a pillar of humanity, but everyone only has a pair of hands, not 3 heads and 6 arms. If it's just Wanzhou, everyone can still handle it with ease. If Chongzhou and Hu County are added, they will be stretched thin and will not be able to handle it. Therefore, I'd like to seek your opinion on whether we should choose a suitable time to issue the recruitment notice. Qiguan Rang and the others did not speak, but their inner voices were the same. Send, send, send. If they did not issue the recruitment notice and recruit fresh blood, these old people would die of exhaustion at the desk. However, something like the recruitment notice was not something that could be issued as one wished. If the contents of the recruitment notice were not satisfactory, the scholars of the world might not be willing to buy it. Therefore, everyone recommended Feng Jin, who was the most talented in literature, and the heavy responsibility was directly placed on him. Feng Jin secretly laughed and cried. He stepped out to ask for details. He was just a ghostwriter when it came to writing the recruitment notice. The core ideas were still provided by the Lord. Jiangpengji thought about it and said, regardless of your status, only talent is important. As soon as she said that, everyone was silent. Feng Jin's expression also froze for a moment, but he quickly recovered and calmed down. In the current selection system, the people selected must have a noble family background and must also have the rigid conditions of benevolence, righteousness, filial piety, and fraternity. Take Dongqing's evaluation system as an example. Family background, virtue, and knowledge belong to the top 3 categories. Appearance, ability, and temperament belong to the bottom 3 categories. Among the top 3 categories, family background and virtue accounted for 90%, and knowledge only accounted for 10%. In other words, if you reincarnated with your eyes wide open and reincarnated well, even if you were born with a mental disability, you would be many times more noble than countless poor students. If the two were placed together, the imperial court would also prioritize the former over the latter. Jiangpengji looked around and asked coldly, why, do you have any objections? Her team had gone through strict selection. Except for Feng Jin, who was tall, rich, and handsome, the others were only tall, and, from the perspective of a poor scholar, they could not possibly object to Jiangpengji's suggestion. Regardless of your status, only talent is important. How many poor scholars' hearts were expressed in these few words? Many poor scholars did not lack ability, but their family background was not good enough. They did not even have the ticket to become a fish that leaped through the dragon's gate. Feng Jin's expression was normal as he said, I have no objections. The others echoed one after another. I think you all have no objections. Jiangpengji spoke the truth. She said, talented people can help you lighten your burden and help you move forward. Useless people without talent will only add another burden to your heavy work. Do you think what I said is reasonable? Everyone was speechless. Chapter 873. The time was still too short. If Jiangpengji was given another 1 or 2 years, she would be able to cultivate a group of talents with a basic foundation. As for the core talents, the cultivation period was even longer. She could only use the recruitment order to recruit people who would be loyal to her. Archiguan Rang lowered his head and flipped through the book. He saw that there were a few smaller items behind the main item, governance. The recruitment order was one of the smaller items, followed by the words, bookstore. Jiangpengji said, I'm afraid that the recruitment order alone won't be able to tempt the scholars in the world, so I plan to announce an important decision. Everyone's hearts skipped a beat. When their lord did not cause trouble, the trouble she caused could make them tremble in fear. Now it was obvious that she was going to cause trouble. How could it be a small matter? Jiangpengji did not say anything else. She gestured for Shangguan Wan to fetch the things. They were also carried on plates, but the previous books were light and thin. The books that were brought up now were all very heavy. These books are for the children of the academy to start learning. In addition to the main text, there are also annotations carefully organized by Mr. Qing Cheng. Hearing his father's name, Qing Yuan's eyes lit up. After getting a book, he hurriedly opened it. After reading the contents, Qing Yuan understood why his father always walked with the wind, as if he was radiating the second spring of his life. The words in the main text were relatively thick, only a little smaller than a copper coin. It looked very easy to read, neither laborious nor harmful to the eyes. The words in the annotations were smaller and more detailed than the main text. The content was all in the vernacular. Even an ordinary person could understand it after reading it once. In addition, there were small strange symbols between each sentence. Feng Jin vaguely discovered something. He could not wait to read it again in a low voice. When he encountered those strange symbols, he subconsciously paused. He suddenly understood the function of the symbols. They were all used to punctuate sentences. Looking at the repeated symbols, he suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. It was obvious that these symbols were not scribbled. Each symbol represented a specific meaning. Not only Feng Jin, but Yang Si and the others also noticed it. Archiguan Rang forcibly suppressed his surging emotions. His fingers swiped across the pages and he quickly flipped through a few pages. He discovered that this primer was not empty talk. The format was uniform. It could be 3 words in a sentence, or 4 words in a line. It was easy to read. The text was popular, easy to read, and easy to remember. It included common sense, traditional sinology, historical stories, and positive life principles. These books were naturally the 3-character classic, 100 family surnames, and other teaching materials that Jiang Pengji had obtained from the audience many years ago. However, other than the 100 family names, Jiang Pengji had changed the other teaching materials beyond recognition. Because the history of the audience's dimension was different from the history of her world, many phrases and allusions could not be used. Jiang Pengji had a good memory and could be said to be well read. She simply followed the template and modified it. Not only did she have to eliminate the non-existent allusions, but she also had to eliminate the extreme and ignorant thoughts one by one. Extract the essence and discard the dregs. After some major changes, she also added a lot of content about this world, such as the deeds of Su Gong of the previous dynasty. She gave the draft after the major changes to Qing Cheng. Qing Cheng read it and was so excited that he could not control himself. He made a second major change to the teaching materials. Taking the 3-character classic as an example, the original version of the teaching materials had more than 1,100 words. After Jiang Pengji and Qing Cheng worked together to make major changes, it was expanded to 3,656 words. Qing Cheng even asked the Zhongzhou great scholar Wan Xian to annotate it and clarify the meaning of each sentence. After some changes, the first edition of the basic teaching materials had a total of 21 books. After a cursory look, there was only one thought in everyone's mind. This set of books was enough to make people go bankrupt, right? Don't think that they were exaggerating. If Jiang Pengji did not play around with rice paper, going bankrupt would be considered a light punishment. Nowadays, the mainstream writing materials were mainly bamboo slips. The more extravagant people used silk books, and the more extravagant people used bamboo paper. In fact, before the appearance of bamboo paper in Hejian, the nobles and gentry used the valuable Kai Ho paper. Our bamboo paper was technically improved on the basis of Kai-ho paper. It was by no means the first. Otherwise, how could Gu Min keep such a precious paper-making technique? Our bamboo paper had a material limitation and was difficult to mass-produce. Jiang Pengji's rice paper was made from sandalwood. The rice paper produced was better than what the audience had imagined. As for sandalwood, it had a strong vitality and a short growth cycle. After the sapling was planted, it could be used as raw material for rice paper in 2 or 3 years. Chongzhou was full of sandalwood. This was one of the reasons why Jiang Pengji asked Lu Shi to go to Chongzhou. In other words, the value of this set of books was far less than what everyone had imagined. After everyone had roughly looked through it, Jiang Pengji said, "This set of books will be the teaching materials for the academy students to use in the future." No one had any objections, only Dian Yan had one. My lord, can I also go to the academy to study for a few days? Dian Yan worked hard to learn words, but learning was not something that could be seen in a day or two. He still had to train his troops and did not have much time. However, seeing such a large set of books, he felt that he had to squeeze some time to learn even if he did not have time. He wanted to keep this set of books properly and pass it down as a family heirloom. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "There is no end to learning. Deputy Captain Dian has such an ambition. Naturally, it is worth encouraging." Dian Yan blushed slightly. He secretly decided that he would not let his lord down. Shi continued, "This set of books is not only for the students to use as a starting point, but I also plan to use it as a gift to the world's famous scholars." Archiguan Rang glanced at the contents of the title page of the 3-character classic and immediately understood his lord's intention. He could not help but smile. The title page was very clean. There were only a few elegant words: author, Wang Yinglin, Lu Shi, commentator, Cheng Cheng. Jiang Pengji did not want to add her name, but there was no such person as Wang Yinglin in the world. She could not clearly say that Wang Yinglin was the original author of the 3-character classic. In order to shut everyone's mouths, after some hesitation, she could only say that she had met this person by chance and obtained inspiration from him. The other teaching materials for beginners were handled in the same way. Archiguan Rang had to admit that his lord was a person with great courage. This set of books was given to the world's famous scholars, not for anything else but for one thing: to create momentum. Once the world's famous scholars approved of it, this set of books would be pushed to the altar. Similarly, those who left their names on this set of books would be pushed to the altar. They would truly become gods in one fell swoop. What did the world's scholars desire the most? It was only fame and fortune. The so-called famous scholars, in layman's terms, were those who had fame but did not become officials. Among this group of people, some were truly noble and had unquestionable integrity. They did not want to become officials. Some wanted to become officials but did not have the qualifications. They could only find another way to make a name for themselves. As long as they had a reputation, there would naturally be people coming to claim them. Once they accepted the claim, they would enter the official career. However, being an official was only a temporary pleasure. How could it compare to writing books and becoming famous throughout the ages? Chapter 874. Famous Scholars. Except for a few people who saw through Jiang Pengji's plan, everyone else felt their hearts ache. This set of books was definitely a treasure that was hard to find. It was more than enough to be a family heirloom. Their lord was rich and overbearing. Not only did she want to donate it to the academy, but she also wanted to give it away for free. In their opinion, the cost of this set was no less than 200,000 strings of coins. How could she give it away just like that? Dian Yan and the others felt their hearts ache. Their cheeks twitched slightly. They wanted to say something to stop her, but none of them knew how to persuade their lord not to squander. Meng Han, who had been in the background, opened his mouth. He asked in surprise, "Does my lord want to use this set of books to attract famous scholars?" If that was the case, the price was too high. Dongqing alone, there were no less than 500 famous scholars who were well known. If everyone was given a set, according to the sky-high cost of 200,000 strings of coins, wouldn't the Lord suffer a huge loss? Our Meng Han had seen many so-called famous scholars with Meng Zhan. In his opinion, most of these people were embroidered pillows. They looked good but were useless. They had nothing to do all day. They gathered together to sing praises, grieve for the coming of spring, and pretend to be coy. They obviously wanted to be an official, but they pretended to be aloof and arrogant. To be honest, they were not good at other things, but they were eloquent and good at gossiping. RTO put it bluntly, many of these famous scholars were more like celebrities. Their ability to get things done left people in the dust. However, did the Lord need such embroidered pillows? Jianghu laughed and said, "It's just a set of books. How can it attract all the famous scholars in the world? This is just a stepping stone." In Jianghu's opinion, the group of famous scholars was a publicity platform. This set of rudimentary books was in their hands. Through their mouths, it would spread at the fastest speed. However, this was only the first step of Jianghu's plan. Just a stepping stone? Meng Han's heart trembled. Of course. Famous people have their own pride. Ordinary things can't move them. Jianghu smiled maliciously and said, "We don't need to spend a lot of money. We just need to send them these beginners' textbooks. Smart people will know what to do." Everyone was speechless. This set of teaching materials were all made from the incomparably precious fine Xian paper. There were 21 books in a set, which was far more expensive than gold and silver. Not only was his master a prodigal, but she was also not very good at arithmetic. The generals were heartbroken. Only a few civil officials remained unmoved. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "My lord is right. If this primer could be put into practice, it would be able to teach all the students in the world, and they could be called the teachers of the world. Not only will his name spread far and wide, his name will also be immortalized for generations to come." RH purposely emphasized the last sentence. After the general heard this, he vaguely understood, and his complexion became much better. From ancient times till now, only Kong Sheng could be called a teacher of all ages. From then on, all scholars set this as their highest goal in life. But who succeeded? Revan, the world-famous teacher, Master Yuanjing, who taught many students and whose literary name spread throughout the 5 countries, was still not qualified. If this set of beginners' textbooks could be truly perfected and enlighten the people, those who left their names in it were destined to be immortalized for generations to come. Smart people could see the great wealth hidden in it, but stupid people would think it was just children's books. Jianghu gave this set of books to the scholars not only to advertise herself, but also to tell them that there was a cake in Wanzhou. This is only the first step. We need to attract talented scholars of virtue and prestige to come and compile the teaching materials together. Jianghu smiled and said, "I have a second step here. Which scholar in the world doesn't want to write books? It's just that they don't have the means to do so. How many precious manuscripts have been lost? I have an idea. When we send out the teaching materials, we will announce to the world that we are willing to open the bookstore to publish books for scholars. There will be 20 copies of each book. As a reward for publishing the books, the bookstore will keep 10 copies of the samples. If you don't want to keep the samples, you can only pay for it yourself." This idea could be said to be bold. As soon as she said this, the civil officials, who were originally calm, could not stay calm. This was not something else, it was publishing a book. Which scholar in the world didn't want their ideas and crystallization to be passed down to future generations? If beginners' textbooks could attract famous scholars to join, then writing books could attract the hearts of countless knowledgeable scholars from poor families. At a time when the aristocratic families monopolized the market, the cake that Jianghu threw out was too attractive. It would definitely make countless scholars fight to the death for it. Even though Feng Jin and the others were mentally prepared, when they heard Jianghu's words, their hearts still could not help but beat wildly. Everyone said, "My lord is very kind." Feng Jin's reaction was still considered calm, but Su Ku, Yang Si, and the others' eyes were dark red and bloodshot. Wrongly they knew the pain of the scholars from poor families. The aristocratic families monopolized knowledge and education, thus monopolizing the official positions and power in the court. Why did people always say, it is difficult for a poor family to produce a noble son? Was it because the children from poor families were all mentally retarded? Not true. The children from poor families wanted to study, but they could not even find a book. How could the illiterate be a match for the noble son who was well-read? Jiang Pengji's move was undoubtedly carrying a mace and giving a blow to the aristocratic families. Why were the aristocratic families so powerful? It was because they held the most important knowledge in their hands. Every aristocratic family had countless precious books and books. They were born with conditions that ordinary people could not have. After many years of development, the aristocratic families had disciples and officials all over the world. Their power was deeply rooted, and they were united by blood relatives, cutting off the path of advancement for the scholars from poor families. If the sons of concubines from poor families wanted to stand out, they often had to rely on the aristocratic families, be humble, and endure humiliation. RTO put it bluntly, it was a distorted and deformed hierarchy of power. If there was any wealth in the world that was shared by the whole world, it was undoubtedly the written word. Jiang Pengji knew that her actions would cause a lot of resistance. Perhaps it would even cause the aristocratic families to group together and attack her. But this was not important. When Yang Si thought of this matter, his heart sank. He said hesitantly, "My lord, should we postpone this matter? If it is suddenly spread, I am afraid it will cause controversy among the scholars in the world." Yang Si did not want Jiang Pengji to be hurt because of this. If she fell, there would be no hope for the poor families. Jiang Pengji sneered and said, "Then let them talk. A dog that bites doesn't bark, and a dog that barks doesn't bite. Your lord is rich. I am willing to be a sucker and publish books for others. Why should they be jealous? I have discussed this matter with Mr. Ching many times and have already set a general plan. In addition to the first two steps, I have a third step, which is to set up a book club that is free and open to the public. Chapter 875. After careful discussion with Mr. Ching, I plan to open the library to the public so that all scholars can enter. Jiang Pengji said this because there was a similar library in the previous dynasty called the Golden Scale Library. The Golden Scale Library was proposed by Prime Minister Huangfu Xiu of the previous dynasty. Its original purpose was to benefit the scholars of poor families. However, since Prime Minister Huangfu's death and his body was dismembered and cooked, the Golden Scale Library became a place that only the nobles were qualified to enter. Jiang Pengji now proposed to build a library similar to the Golden Scale Library. Presumably, all the scholars of poor families in the world would respond. Previously, I said that I would help people write books. With the consent of the people involved, the samples they leave behind will also be added to the library. We can specially open such a place for people to communicate and discuss. Jiang Pengji was sure that if these three things were done well, Wanzhou would become the holy land in the hearts of the scholars of the world. When that time came, she would slowly choose and not worry about not having enough talents. After saying this, Jiang Pengji began to select people. Archiguan Rang and Fengzhen went to Chongzhou. Yang Si went to Hu County. Su Ku and Feng Jin stayed behind to manage Wanzhou. Lu Shi agreed to retreat behind the scenes and give all power to Jiang Pengji, but whether she could completely conquer Chongzhou would depend on her ability. Archiguan Rang was from Chongzhou. He was very familiar with the situation there. Fengzhen looked unreliable, but in fact, he was very scheming. When the two of them worked together, it would be difficult for others to take advantage of them. The local nobles in Hu County had been beaten by Lu Shi, so it was relatively easy to conquer. Yang Si could handle it alone. Su Ku and Feng Jin had a tacit understanding. Jiang Pengji was very relieved to let them stay in the base camp. After talking about management, let's talk about stationing the fields. Since ancient times, before the troops and horses moved, provisions and fodder came first. With sufficient provisions and fodder, there would be confidence in fighting a war. Jiang Pengji said, stationing the fields has begun to show results. Before Zixiao went to Shangjing, he gave me many suggestions. I think it is feasible. I plan to open up a wasteland of fertile farmland in Chongzhou and station troops there on a large scale. In this way, not only will we be able to relieve the pressure on our supplies, but we will also be able to shorten the length of our supply lines. Archiguan Rang and Fengzhen had already heard Wei Ci talk about the matter of Chongzhou's farming. Naturally, they had no objections. The others secretly calculated and agreed with this proposal. If they didn't farm, they wouldn't have been able to raise such a large army. After many rounds of recruitment, Wanzhou now had 60,000 soldiers and horses, and the size of the female battalion had also expanded to 7,000. This was the result of Jiang Pengji deliberately raising the bar. If they did not reject anyone, their military strength could reach more than 100,000. Within the borders of Dongqing, Jiang Pengji was the undisputed ruler of the north. Li Yun asked, is there any ownerless wasteland in Chongzhou that can be cultivated? Because of excessive land annexation, a lot of land is private property of the wealthy families. This time, the scale of the farm should be quite large. If there isn't enough land, I'm afraid it won't work. Jiang Pengji smirked. We'll talk about it when the time comes. The location of the field can only be decided after a field inspection. If the local tyrants were smart, she didn't mind a win-win cooperation. If they were not sensible, she could only seize the field by force. Originally, Wei Ci was in charge of it. However, Wei Ci had already gone to Shangjing to supervise the construction of the provincial government. Now, he was divided and unable to do anything. Jiang Pengji thought about it and named Li Yun. She asked him to take on the role of Chongzhou's military officer of agriculture and specifically deal with this matter. Li Yunkai happily agreed. There were only so many details about the field. Jiang Pengji changed the topic to training soldiers. When it came to training soldiers, the group of generals seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. One by one, they were full of energy. Jiang Pengji asked them about the progress of the training of new recruits one by one and received satisfactory responses. In 5 years at the latest, we will go to war with the northern borderline. Jiang Pengji started talking. The generals couldn't help but perk up their ears and listen attentively. They were afraid of missing a word. I think everyone is clear about the strength of the northern borderline's cavalry. They move quickly and deploy their troops flexibly, but they also have obvious disadvantages. I intend to take advantage of this disadvantage and specially train the army to restrain the cavalry. I have proposed this before, but the scale of the training is too small and the results are not great. Now, we will really implement this and officially divide the army. The northern borderline relies too much on the cavalry. The army is very monotonous. Their speed is indeed very fast, but they are not invincible. They also have fatal weaknesses. First, their defense is not strong. Second, the army is too monotonous. Once they encounter a specialized army, there is almost no way to turn the situation around. Jiang Pengji intends to officially divide the army into different types and increase the diversity of the army. This will also allow more flexible deployment and command on the battlefield. In order to restrain the cavalry, Jiang Pengji came up with a lot of targeted plans. There are military formations, army types, defensive equipment, and more insidious traps. Everyone turned the page of the booklet in their hands. Suddenly, they felt a chill down their backs. There was only one thought in their minds: how difficult is it for our lord to get along with the cavalry? Looking at the content written by Jiang Pengji, they thought about it a little and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat for the northern borderline cavalry. First, let's talk about military formations. The booklet drew a simple fish scale formation. The heavy infantry were to hold shields and spears and form a square formation similar to fish scales. Jiang Pengji had led more than 100 soldiers to sneak into Jiamen Pass and break out of the encirclement. The military formation they used could be regarded as a small fish scale formation. However, the northern borderline cavalry is mostly light cavalry in cloth clothes or rattan armor. They are very mobile. If the enemy is not surrounded, this kind of fish scale formation is not very effective. Then there is the spear formation that everyone is more familiar with. The advantages of the spear formation are obvious, but so are its weaknesses. However, Jiang Pengji previously proposed to divide the army types and let the different types cooperate to make up for each other's shortcomings. This way, the spear formation is not without merit. Speaking of military formations, there are also ferocious crossbowmen. They use the improved crossbows that Jiang Pengji has improved several times before. Jiang Pengji's original troops all used the improved crossbows. Over the years, she has developed many ways to cooperate in battle. It is quite effective. In addition to the improved crossbows, the army also has the ballista. It has a long range, great power, and high lethality. It can cause great damage to the charging northern borderline cavalry. In addition to these, there are other gadgets, such as the barricade spear and the iron caltrops. The barricade spear can be arranged in front of the army to block the charging horses and prevent the cavalry from charging. The iron caltrops have 4 sides. No matter how you look at them, there will be one side facing up. They are sprinkled on the enemy's charging path and slightly covered with grass and trees. If a horse steps on them, the iron caltrops will pierce into the horse's hooves, almost crippling the horse. In the booklet, they also saw 2 new weapons with new designs. One is shaped like a sickle, specially used to cut the horse's legs. The other is thick and mighty, named Zamadeo. Jiang Pengji intends to train special forces, about 5,000 of them, to fight against the northern borderline's warhorses. Compared to the ability to fight on horseback, the northern borderline cavalry is not good at fighting on foot. Chapter 876. The political situation was turbulent and chaos arose. Zhongzhou was ambitious. They wanted to take advantage of the endless war between Nanxing and Dongqing to send troops to take advantage and expand their territory. However, they also had a head full of lawsuits. The internal struggle was unprecedentedly fierce and the lives of the people were getting worse. Perhaps it was because they were nearing their end and followed in the footsteps of Nanxing and Zhongzhou. There were already several peasant armies that tried to rebel in Zhongzhou. However, the scale of the rebel army was too small. Before they could make any waves, they were brutally suppressed by the official army. The civil society was restless. The aristocratic families that had their own armies also had their own worries. There was a faint sign that the feudal lords were going to split. At this sensitive time, a shocking piece of news came out of the Zhongzhou palace. Empress Du was a wooden man who had turned into a demon. The ambitious feudal lords couldn't hold back and used this as an excuse to scold the current emperor for going against the grain and allowing a demon to harm the palace. They even spread the news. Who knew if the emperor, princes, and princesses in the palace were still human? This rumor spread quickly and the already weakened imperial power was on the verge of collapse. Of course, the imperial family would never admit to this rumor and denied it. However, Empress Du was dead and the behavior of the imperial family was suspicious. The people were more and more convinced of the rumors about the wooden demon. The emperor ordered that after Empress Du died, she was not allowed to enter the imperial mausoleum or enjoy offerings. He also took back the golden seals that Empress Du had used when she was conferred the title. Although he didn't say that she was abolished, this treatment was no different from abolishing her. Within Zhongzhou, who didn't know that Empress Du was favored by the emperor? If she wasn't favored, how could Empress Du's 4 self-accomplishment classics for women be so popular in Zhongzhou? Now that Empress Du was dead, if there wasn't something fishy going on, why would the emperor treat the woman he once loved so cruelly? After some thought, the people's guess was actually very close to the truth. When Empress Du was unlucky, the Du family was the first to bear the brunt. The Du family was already starting to decline. Who knew that the virtuous Empress Du would appear? Her 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was praised by the world's famous scholars and was set as a role model for women. The Du family also benefited from it and couldn't help but feel elated. Even their bones became a few pounds lighter. Now that their backer had fallen and they had offended many aristocratic families with heavy military power, they would sooner or later be dealt with by others. Therefore, this branch of the Du family did not have an easy time. When they were in the limelight, everyone wanted to bask in the limelight. When they were in dire straits, any Tom, Dick, or Harry could kick them when they were down. Faced with the huge difference in their situation, many of the Du clansmen started to complain about Empress Du. However, the descendants of Emperor Du were all dead, and their corpses were nowhere to be found. With nowhere to vent their anger, they could only vent their anger on Du Wunyang. Du Wunyang was Feng Jin's eldest brother, Feng Gui's first wife, the original Madame Feng Du. After her separation from Feng Gui, she was safely sent back to Zhongzhou. According to the increasingly abnormal atmosphere in Zhongzhou, as a woman who had been chased out by her husband's family, she should be caught and drowned. However, she had Feng Gui's permission to release her wife. The person who sent her back was also a trusted aide whom Feng Gui had carefully selected. After a series of struggles, Du Wunyang barely managed to keep her life. She was casually sent to a Buddhist hall by Madame Du to become a nun. Du Wunyang hated Feng Gui in her heart. She had been thinking about how to use her family's influence to exert pressure on Feng Gui and make him welcome her back on his knees. However, the cruel reality hit her hard. Not to mention using her family's influence, if Feng Gui had not sent his trusted aide to deal with Madame Du, she would have long been tied up and drowned. Even so, she had never felt a shred of gratitude or remorse. Du Wunyang learned from Empress Du's style of doing things. She used her opponent as a stepping stone to climb to the top, thus earning her virtuous reputation. Now that Empress Du had passed away and the Du clan was implicated, Du Wunyang, who was in the Buddhist hall, was naturally not having a good time. They did not want her life, but they sent female servants to humiliate her every day. They even made ugly male servants watch her being humiliated. According to the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, Du Wunyang should have committed suicide to protect her reputation. However, just as Feng Gui had mocked, she had always been strict with others and lenient with herself. Her life was so important, how could she give it up so easily? She could use the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to restrain others and suppress her opponents, but she would never use it to punish herself. Du Wunyang was in dire straits, but her ex-husband, Feng Gui, was unexpectedly blessed. Ever since Shangyang County was taken over by Jianghu, the lives of the people in the county were guaranteed. Feng Gui finally did not have to be so busy that he could not return home. When he had more free time, he would devote himself to reading. Occasionally, he would go out to visit friends and participate in scholarly gatherings and poetry gatherings. He personally taught his 2 children how to read. With Du Wunyang as an example, Feng Gui personally asked about his 2 children's daily lives. One day, he had just returned from outside. There was already someone waiting for him outside the manor. Feng Gui was secretly surprised. He followed the person to see his father, Feng Ren. Huaizhang, come over and take a look at this. As soon as he entered, Feng Gui saw his father, Feng Ren, sitting on a mat. Beside him was a stack of books. Unlike the usual scroll-bound books that he was familiar with, these books were fastened with white thread. Father, this is? Feng Gui walked forward and picked up one of the books. It felt smooth and cold to the touch. When he opened the title page, he saw a familiar name. He flipped through it again. The profound meaning inside was thought-provoking. Feng Gui came from a noble family that had been passed down for close to 1,000 years. After many years of accumulation, the family had a collection of more than 100,000 books. Feng Gui didn't dare to say that he had read all of them, but he had some impression of them. However, he was completely unfamiliar with the books in his hands. In other words, it was highly possible that these books were newly published. The newly published books even used expensive paper. It was extremely extravagant. They were sent here from Wanzhou not long ago, Feng Ren said. Second brother gave them to you? Feng Gui was the first to think of his younger brother. Feng Ren shook his head and said, "That's not the case. These were given to me by the Wanzhou magistrate, Lu Shi. Not only do I have them, but other famous scholars also have them." When Feng Gui heard this, his expression cracked. Not to mention the contents of the books, just the paper alone was worth no less than 200,000 strings of coins. Even if Lu Shi owned a papermaking workshop and was very wealthy, he couldn't afford to squander like this, could he? Gifting one set wasn't enough, and he even gave it to other famous scholars? Feng Ren said, "Take a look at the contents." Feng Gui did as he was told and read carefully. Not long after, he was fascinated. Feng Ren snorted and said, "Lu Shi played a very big game of chess. The bait he threw out was too tempting." Feng Gui agreed with him. He could see clearly that the potential value of this set of books was immeasurable. Feng Ren threw another bomb at Feng Gui, causing him to be at a loss for what to do. The Wanzhou magistrate, Lu Shi, not only generously gifted books, but he also generously expressed his willingness to write books for the world's scholars, Feng Ren said. "Do you still remember the golden scale pavilion of the previous dynasty?" In his letter, Lu Shi mentioned that he wanted to rebuild the golden scale pavilion and provide it to the world's poor scholars for free. "Currently, only I have received this letter. The others have only received books." Feng Gui lowered his gaze and said, "Lu Shi, this is..." Chapter 877. For the Feng family to be able to survive for thousands of years, other than strict family rules and noble family values, it was also due to their foresight. For example, Prime Minister Huangfu built the Golden Scale Pavilion in the previous dynasty. It was said to contain millions of books. Where did these millions of books come from? Other than the 30,000 books donated by Prime Minister Huangfu himself, the rest were donated by various aristocratic families. The Feng family had donated 100,000 books. Books were lifeless, but people were alive. It was precisely these 100,000 books that protected the Feng clan, allowing them to obtain another 200 years of prosperity. Compared to the other aristocratic families, the Feng family's style was different. If one were to compare those aristocratic families with armies to strong men with 8 packs, then the Feng family would be like a refined scholar with a tall hat and a wide belt. Not only did they look different, but their combat abilities were also on a different level. If it wasn't for the fact that they had so few troops, the Feng family wouldn't have had to hand it over to Jianghu for the sake of the safety of Shenyang County. Now, the Feng family was faced with the same choice. "Lu Shi wants us to donate books?" Feng Gui was a little angry. It wasn't that he was selfish and didn't want to donate books, but did Lu Shi have the right to do so? During the Xia dynasty, the Feng family was willing to donate 100,000 books in response to Prime Minister Huangfu's call. More importantly, it was for the long-term future of the family. 100,000 books in exchange for more than 200 years of prosperity for the Feng clan. This was a very good deal. The Xia dynasty had unified the Central Plains, but Lu Shi had only occupied half of Dongqing. Prime Minister Huangfu was extremely powerful and had power over the court. Compared to him, Lu Shi was nothing. If they donated the books to Lu Shi to enrich the Golden Scale Pavilion, what benefits would the Feng family get? Feng Gui's idea was exactly what Feng Ren had in mind. However, after his anger subsided, the sly old fox thought about it carefully and felt that this deal might work. Huaizhang, in Dongqing, besides Lu Shi, who else can stop the disaster of the north borderline? Feng Gui was silent. After a while, he said, "Besides her, there is only Lu Shi." Feng Ren said, "A few days ago, I received news that Lu Shi, that sly old fox, has chosen to retire. He has handed Chongzhou and Hu County over to Lu Shi." Feng Gui didn't say anything. The northern borderline has already matured. Although the horse plague has delayed it, it will probably recover in 3 to 5 years and send troops to Dongqing again. Look at the current situation. The royal family is struggling at death's door, and the other feudal vassals have their own armies and are independent. If the northern borderline took advantage of the situation and attacked, there would be internal chaos and external enemies. Who could stop the northern borderline Iron Cavalry? The Feng clan had been rooted in Shenyang County for generations. If the northern borderline invaded, the Feng clan would not be able to protect themselves. Unless the entire family migrated and fled to another place. Speaking to this point, there was a hint of desolation in his voice. Now, the world was in chaos and wars were happening everywhere. If they escaped from Shenyang County, where could they migrate to? In comparison, Lu Shi had managed Wanzhou in an orderly manner and had become a rare peaceful paradise for Dongqing. It was better for the Feng family to express goodwill to her and help her. Feng Gue understood the meaning behind his father's drawing and his expression changed. Father wants to help Lu Shi, that's not the case. Feng Ren didn't want to pick a side now. This was a decision that concerned the survival of the entire family. How could he make such a rash decision? Father, what do you mean by this? Feng Ren said, I'm just expressing my goodwill. Expressing goodwill didn't mean choosing a side. Strictly speaking, the Feng clan and Jiang Pengji had common interests. The stronger Jiang Pengji's power grew, the safer the Feng clan would be. Moreover, Feng Jin was Jiang Pengji's trusted confidant. With such a relationship, the two could be considered as natural allies. I want to bring the 10,000 books to Lu Shi first. Saying this, Feng Ren pointed at the set of beginner's textbooks. These books are very suitable for children to learn. His words seem simple, but they contain infinite logic. If we can implement them thoroughly, perhaps they can really open the minds of the people. The Feng clan wasn't without ambition, but their ambition was different from other clans. As a rare millennium-old aristocratic family, they only had one goal: to continue the family line. While the other aristocratic families were desperately gathering wealth, oppressing the people, and searching for treasures, the Feng clan adhered to their ancestral rules. They didn't fight or plunder, didn't touch military power, didn't make enemies everywhere, and didn't provoke resentment from the people by force or trickery. They wholeheartedly guarded the cultural wealth their ancestors had accumulated. Before the Xia dynasty was established, there was a chaotic era of 16 kingdoms that lasted for hundreds of years. How many prominent clans were destroyed at that time? Only the Feng clan of Shenyang remained standing even though Shenyang County had changed hands several times. After all, the millennium-old aristocratic families and the new nouveau riche had different ideologies. Feng Ren said, I'll go take a look. It'll be a pity to miss such a good opportunity. Not to mention other things, just the set of books in front of him was enough to push Qing Qing to the top ranks of famous scholars. Before this, how many people had heard of Qing Cheng's name? The cake was only so big. No matter what, the Feng clan had to take a bite or two. If Lu Shi was the final winner, this investment was definitely the best choice Feng Ren had made in his life. At the same time, many famous scholars in Dongqing also received this set of beginner's textbooks. Some people scoffed, but when they saw the names on the title page, they also felt jealous. Some people were so shocked that they couldn't wait to sleep with these books every day. At the same time, they used their connections to inquire about Lu Shi and the others. The topic was highly discussed, and so was its popularity. The names of Qing Qing and the others often appeared in big and small gatherings of famous scholars. Overnight, they became famous all over the world. After the public opinion fermented for a while, another piece of heavy news came crashing down. Write books and become famous immediately. How many scholars dreamed of this? This was a shortcut for countless famous scholars to further promote their literary names. The ancient times were not the modern times, where one could publish a book by spending tens of thousands of dollars. If one wanted to publish a book in the ancient times, one could not afford it even if they had a lot of money. Jiang Pengji's popularity was already very high. Now that such a big piece of news was revealed, people yearned to go to Wanzhou. This was not the end. When the news of Wanzhou investing money to rebuild the Jinling Pavilion spread, many aristocratic families looked at it coldly. The poor children were so excited that they could not control themselves. Jiang Pengji knew that this move would attract many talents, but she never thought that she would catch such a big fish. It was no longer a river fish. It was clearly a whale. "Greetings, master." Hearing that there was an ancient person visiting, Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She immediately asked someone to invite him to the main hall. Seeing the person, even someone as calm as Jiang Pengji could not help but be shocked. She came back to her senses and quickly bowed to the person. The hale and hearty Master Yuanjing smiled and helped her up. He said gently, "Times are different now. Magistrate Lu is too polite. A teacher for a day is a father for life. It is my duty for a student to bow to a master." Jiang Pengji quickly adjusted her emotions, but her heart was still in turmoil. She never thought that she could catch such a big fish like Master Yuanjing. Wasn't this person unintentionally involved in the fight for the dukes? Was he wholeheartedly focused on guarding the academy and educating people? Now that he appeared in front of her, how could she not be surprised? Surprise. Surprise. Chapter 878. It turned out that Jiang Pengji had good taste. Master Yuanjing didn't come to help her. He was just interested in the beginner's teaching materials. She wasn't surprised by the result. Master Yuanjing was a highly respected teacher in Dongqing. He had taught many students for decades and had accumulated a wealth of teaching experience. With him, the value of the beginner's teaching materials would reach another level. It would be accepted and recognized by more people. If she spread the news that Master Yuanjing was coming to Wanzhou, it would attract more students to gather in Wanzhou. However, Jiang Pengji had to suppress the tempting idea to avoid Master Yuanjing's dislike. He wasn't willing to intervene in the battle between the feudal lords, so she couldn't make a decision on her own. "Master, you must be tired from the journey. I'll ask someone to help you settle down." After the small talk, Jiang Pengji saw that Master Yuanjing looked tired. She asked with concern, "Master, you came from Langyi County. It's a long journey. Why didn't you bring more people to serve you?" "I don't care about those things. Why would I need so many people to serve me?" Mr. Yuanjing smiled and said, "If I were 10 years younger, I would be able to travel alone. Now that I'm old, I've become a burden." Needless to say, when Master Yuanjing was young, he was also a ruthless person who fought along the way. He might be amiable now, but when he was young, he killed a few bandits. As they were talking, there were unfamiliar footsteps approaching. Jiang Pengji looked in the direction of the sound and saw a slightly plump young man standing outside. Seeing Jiang Pengji look at him, the young man was stunned. He immediately bowed respectfully. Jiang Pengji smiled. "Senior Zuda, long time no see. Why are we so distant?" The young man's surname was Tang. His first name was Yao. His courtesy name was Zuda. He and Jiang Pengji had a bad relationship. Back in the day, they had a conflict at Jishan Hot Spring in Shangjing. Tang Yao stood up for two playboys who had offended Jiang Pengji. Of course, the conflict ended with Jiang Pengji's victory. Master Yuanjing even reprimanded Tang Yao. Later, Jiang Pengji went to Langyi to study. Tang Yao didn't like her. Although he didn't deliberately cause trouble, he always treated her coldly. Jiang Pengji realized that he meant no harm, so she did not take it to heart. In Jiang Pengji's memory, Tang Yao was a young man born in a gentry family. He was proud of his family background and bloodline, and he worked hard to protect this honor. From Tang Yao's point of view, Jiang Pengji was a weirdo in the circle of the gentry. Looking at it that way, it made sense that Tang Yao did not like Jiang Pengji. Tang Yao stood outside, hesitating to enter. The expression on his face was slightly stiff, and he did not dare to make eye contact with Jiang Pengji. Master Yuanjing found it funny and called out, "Zuda, come here." Tang Yao hesitated for a moment, but he did not dare to disobey his master's order. He walked steadily to Master Yuanjing's side and sat down. "Master." Tang Yao bowed to Yuanjing, then turned to Jiang Pengji and said, "Magistrate of Liuzhou." Jiang Pengji smiled. "I haven't seen you for a few years. Senior Zuda has become more mature." After saying that, Tang Yao's expression slightly twitched, but he didn't dare to refute. Master Yuanjing smiled and said, "Don't blame Zuda." He was shocked too. Surprised? It couldn't be. Was her face really that ugly? Master Yuanjing smiled and explained, "A few months ago, I received news that Lanting is a girl." Zuda refused to believe it and insisted that it was slandered by others. Now that he saw Lanting in person, how could he not be shocked? Although she's a girl, she's still better than thousands of men. I see. In that case, it's my fault. Jiang Pengji recalled the 3 years she spent studying in Langyi County and could not help but laugh. There were probably many people who were as confused as Tang Yao. She studied in Langyi for 3 years. She thought she studied seriously, but in the eyes of others, she was still a model of ignorance and incompetence. There were even people who said she was a libertine who slept with prostitutes and secretly spread the rumor that she impregnated an unknown prostitute. Although it was a groundless rumor and there was no concrete evidence, it could be indirectly proved that Jiang Pengji's reputation in Langyi was not good. Even though Jiang Pengji had left Langyi, many places still spread her legend. When Jiang Pengji's identity was revealed, those people's faces were slapped swollen. She was a girl. No matter how much she slept with prostitutes, it was impossible for her to impregnate someone. As for the rumor of heartless men abandoning good girls, it was even more unfounded. The few people who liked to smear her reputation kept quiet out of fear and closed their doors. Master Yuanjing said, "You have your own difficulties. How can I blame you? If there were no difficulties, who would hide their true identity for more than 10 years? Jiang Pengji smiled noncommittally. To facilitate the academic exchange between Master Yuanjing and Qingcheng, Jiang Pengji moved Master Yuanjing's residence near the latter. Just as Jiang Pengji had guessed, Master Yuanjing did not get involved in the government affairs of Wanzhou. Tang Yao, who was by Master Yuanjing's side, also behaved himself. He accompanied Master Yuanjing to visit Qingcheng every day. As soon as the two academic education maniacs met, it was as if the heavens had struck and the earth was on fire. The scene of the collision of ideas was like sparks and lightning. Every time the two of them talked excitedly, they would always forget to eat and sleep, as if they regretted not meeting each other earlier. Jiang Pengji gave a set of 21 beginner teaching materials, but in Master Yuanjing's eyes, something was still missing. Qingcheng respected the big shot in the educational world. If Master Yuanjing said something was missing, there must be something missing. However, the two discussed for a few days, but they could not grasp the inspiration. Until Jiang Pengji visited them by chance. She heard Master Yuanjing and Qingcheng's doubts and said carefully, "The 6 skills of a gentleman are divided into rites, music, strategy, mathematics, calligraphy, and archery. The soldiers in the military camp are divided into different categories, such as infantry, cavalry, archers, and crossbowmen. So on and so forth. The beginner teaching materials naturally have to be carefully classified to differentiate the difficulty, from easy to difficult. If all the content is mixed up and taught to the students at the same time, it will be too complicated. Secondly, even the teachers can't distinguish which students are good at. If they can't even distinguish this, how can they teach in accordance with their aptitude?" Master Yuanjing and Qingcheng were suddenly enlightened. They seemed to have broken through a bottleneck. Countless inspirations burst forth in their minds. The two of them gathered together and got busy again. They were so engrossed in it that they forgot everything else. They directly put Jiang Pengji aside. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Seeing the strange glint in their eyes, she secretly broke into a cold sweat for the students who would use the teaching materials in the future. No one paid attention to Jiang Pengji. She stayed for a while and was ready to leave. Tang Yao stood up to send her off. Tang Yao deliberately lagged behind and followed behind Jiang Pengji. Before entering the door, Tang Yao said, "Magistrate Lu, I have a question." Jiang Pengji stopped and looked at Tang Yao. "Senior brother Zuda, please ask away." Chapter 879. The audience in the streaming room had a good impression of Tang Yao. Seeing that he kept avoiding Jiang Pengji's gaze, they thought the young man had a crush on their cool streamer. Half a minute ago, they were still optimistic and mistakenly thought that Tang Yao wanted to confess. But, after hearing Tang Yao's words, many of them were furious. Tang Yao, I'm so angry. Who does this kid think he is? Mo Ling Yin, how dare he say that the little angel by the Lord's side is a humble person? Believe it or not, a bunch of red bean buns will teach him a lesson. Li Jiao Macho, I feel that this kid is too naive. No one's wealth comes out of nowhere. He can wear silk and satin and have the right to talk to the streamer face to face. Isn't it because he was born into a good family and has a good ancestor? Raw blueberry juice, is this the legendary difference in family status? To be honest, it's a little annoying. Tens of thousands of years ago, whose ancestors weren't monkeys climbing trees? A few hundred years ago, whose ancestors weren't farmers facing the yellow soil with their backs to the sky? If you have the ability to be proud of having a good ancestor here, why don't you work hard so that your descendants can boast about their ancestors? Su Huan City, everyone understands this, but the ancients didn't listen to this. Otherwise, why would there be hierarchy? The audience in the streaming room discussed, and Jiang Pengji's face darkened. She asked, why should I be ridiculed? Tang Yao's lips moved. Looking at Jiang Pengji's bright eyes, he momentarily forgot how to speak. When he realized what he had said, Jiang Pengji's face darkened. Tang Yao said, how can the governor be so lowly? Look at the people under your rule. One is a sinner who has been branded, one is the son of a prostitute, one is a mixed blood, and the rest are uncivilized, courageous, and unwise boors. Since it's a great matter to help the world, why do you need to work with such lowly and immoral people? If this matter is spread, the scholars of the world will naturally be ashamed. Jiang Pengji snorted coldly after hearing that. Tang Yao felt a slight chill on his back. He subconsciously took a small step back. An indescribable chill spread from the soles of his feet to his brain. Jiang Pengji sneered. Oh. But I don't think it's worth laughing at. On the contrary, it's you who said it that's hilarious. Tang Yao's face paled as if someone had nailed him to the spot. Master Yuanjing knew about Tang Yao's problem. He tried to correct it, but it was not very effective. This time, he had brought him here to broaden his horizons, so that he would not be a frog at the bottom of a well. Tang Yao's family background wasn't as high as Feng Jin's, but he wasn't weak either. He grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth, and the people around him instilled in him the idea that his family's bloodline was noble, and that the aristocratic families were born to be superior to the poor. He slowly accepted this kind of brainwashing, and he felt that people from poor families were insignificant and without virtue, and that he shouldn't associate with them. It was because of his admiration for Yuan Jing that he became a disciple of the Langyi Academy. This was the first time his outlook on life was impacted. Master Yuanjing paid particular attention to education without discrimination. He always insisted on teaching students in accordance with their aptitude. Therefore, his students had different backgrounds. Tang Yao never interacted with students who weren't part of the landowning households. It seemed very rude, but this kind of behavior was normal among landowning households. Tang Yao was furious. He originally wanted to befriend Jiang Pengji, but he didn't expect her to hang out with people from all walks of life. It was fine that she didn't want to learn, and she slept with other women, but she had the bad habits of eating, drinking, and gambling. She behaved rudely, and she didn't have the slightest moral integrity that a landowning household should have. Jiang Pengji looked at Tang Yao coldly. The sinner you mentioned, his birth mother was killed by a domineering country gentleman. As a son, how can he be indifferent? When an ordinary man is angry, blood can be spilled. Is it wrong for Xiaoyu to stand up for his mother? Tang Yao was speechless. His birth mother was killed, and as a son, he was indifferent. Wasn't that extremely unfilial? An unfilial person was an animal. As for the son of a prostitute? If it weren't for such an unfilial and unfaithful animal, would the women in the brothel still have feelings for him and get pregnant? The mistakes of parents don't implicate children. You said that Wenjing was a mixed blood, but in the end, wasn't it because the nobles of Dongqing were cowardly and incompetent, so their land was invaded by foreign clans, and their people were humiliated? If it was a humiliation, shouldn't those nobles, who held their positions without doing any work, commit suicide to apologize? Tang Zuda, I can still listen if you criticize them based on their talents. Using such an excuse to attack others is really the behavior of a despicable person. Tang Yao stood rooted to the ground after being scolded by Jiang Pengji. His ears were ringing. He wanted to refute, but the words were at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say them. Jiang Pengji continued, you said that the generals under me are all uncivilized, brave but not astute. That's a big mistake. If it weren't for them fighting in the north and south to quell the calamity of the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group, Wanzhou today would just be purgatory on earth. Tang Zuda, have you ever seen the tragic sight of white bones exposed in the wild and no rooster crowing for 1,000 miles? I don't want to hit you, but with your body, I'm afraid you can't even withstand one of my fingers. In conclusion, Tang Yao, who was neither good at literature nor martial arts, had no right to criticize her little princesses. Jiang Pengji added one last stab. The old people often say, when you drink water, don't forget the person who dug the well. The grains you eat, the clothes you wear, every grain, every stitch and thread, what do you get from your own labor? These are all the hard work of ordinary people. From the beginning to the end, have you ever put in any effort? Have you ever shed a drop of sweat? In that case, are you considered an ungrateful person? After saying that, Jiang Pengji snorted coldly, turned around, and left, leaving Tang Yao rooted to the ground. Tang Yao followed Master Yuanjing and left Langyi. As they hurried along, they traveled and studied. He, who lived in an ivory tower, finally saw the cruel scene outside the ivory tower. The wild wolves and firedogs were so hungry that they were emaciated. In order to find food, they had no choice but to search for human bones on the ground to satisfy their hunger. The damaged white corpses were half covered and half exposed in the wilderness. In a trance, they seemed to be able to hear the mournful sobs of lonely souls. The refugees on the road had lost their humanity under the oppression of life. They could do all kinds of inhumane things. Such a miserable scene caused people to panic in their hearts. After entering the territory of Wanzhou, it turned out to be another paradise on earth. After asking carefully, Tang Yao discovered that the people had put those humble people on a pedestal. Some people even set up longevity tablets for them in their homes. Feng Jin, Wei Xiai, Feng Zhen, and the others were all from gentry families. How could the others deserve it? That was why Tang Yao was so conflicted when he saw Jiang Pengji. What he saw and heard were in a fierce struggle with his own thoughts. The two sides were in a deadlock. Tang Yao suddenly had an impulse to try to find an answer from Jiang Pengji. Unsurprisingly, he was severely criticized by her. Tang Yao returned to the house in a daze. Master Yuanjing and Ching Ching were chatting and laughing. Zuda, how is it? Tang Yao pursed his lips and did not say a word. Although the master was always nagging, he was sure that the other party definitely knew what had happened. Master Yuanjing sighed and said, if there's anything you don't understand, just watch, listen, and think. Why bother to provoke her? Chapter 880. Tang Yao still had no reaction. He looked at the dejected Lu Shi, like a defeated rooster. He had lost all his vigor. Cheng Cheng's gaze shifted between the two of them, as if he was curious about what the teacher and student were up to. After a few breaths, Tang Yao said dejectedly, I meant well. Although the boy's words were harsh, Tang Yao didn't mean any harm. Jiang Pengji had either been fighting or preparing for war all these years. She didn't attend gatherings between the gentry, so she didn't know what others thought of her. Tang Yao was different. He kept in close contact with the gentry, so he was well informed about all kinds of gossip. Lu Shi was the legitimate son of the Lu family in Hejin. No, the legitimate daughter. She had a rather noble background, but she didn't want to improve herself. She spent all her time with a group of lowly and immoral people. Tang Yao often heard people talking about her behind her back. Everyone said they were ashamed to be associated with her. Based on Tang Yao's worldview and standpoint, there was nothing wrong with those words. The noble families and the commoners were originally people of two different worlds. Yuanjing said, "That person's honey is my frost." Tang Yao said, "But," his lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were hovering on the tip of his tongue. Tang Yao was confused. Had Lu Shi not discovered the crux of the problem? What crux? Why were there so few people seeking refuge with her? In terms of fame, fortune, birth, and prestige, her overall conditions weren't worse than others. Even though she was a woman, Dongqing wasn't Zhongzhao. She hadn't suffered too much from the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Not to mention that she was the official governor of a province. She was in the limelight during the alliance meeting. With such good conditions, why were there so few gentry families willing to seek refuge with her? On the surface, it seemed that Lu Shi was in his prime. Seeking refuge with Lu Shi was more promising than seeking refuge with her. In fact, there was another, deeper reason hidden within. How many of the people around Jianghu were from proper aristocratic families? The civil officials were divided equally. Feng Jin, Wei Xi, and Feng Zhen were from gentry families. But other than Feng Jin, the other two's families had fallen. As for the generals, the situation was even worse. Except for Luoyue, who was somewhat promising, the others were all wiped out. Therefore, in terms of power structure, 80% of Wanzhou was made up of people from poor backgrounds. In the eyes of those proud and arrogant landowning households, this was just a group that couldn't be shown in public. Those aristocratic families who valued bloodlines and insisted on family status were not even willing to share the same room with people of humble origins. To put it bluntly, they would feel disgusted even if they breathed the same air, not to mention working under a lord and being suppressed by someone of humble origins. How could they tolerate this? This was absolutely intolerable. Not every landowning household was as noble as the Feng family and had a clear understanding of themselves and the general trend of the world. This was also the reason why the Feng clan had been able to survive for 1,000 years. In contrast, the other aristocratic families had been beaten to death on the beach one after another. Tang Yao said that Su Ke was a sinner who had been branded, Qiguan Rang was the son of a prostitute, and Yang Si was a mixed-blood bastard. This just happened to reflect the position of power in Wanzhou in the eyes of the aristocrats. A lowly birth was an original sin. How could a lowly and immoral person be associated with them? As for those reckless martial artists who lacked literary virtue and could not be educated, they were even more despised. Dongqing had always valued literature and restrained martial arts. Coupled with their poor birth, the group of martial artists in Wanzhou was naturally looked down upon and despised. Of course, there was no lack of clear-headed and noble people among the aristocrats, but they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Tang Yao was scolded by Jiang Pengji, and he felt very wronged. In his opinion, he was persuading her out of goodwill to get closer to the aristocrats and not to lower her status by mingling with a group of humble people. Master Yuanjing sighed. Tang Yao was a very filial and good student who respected his teachers, but he also had the bad habits of the aristocrats. As a smart person, how could he not see through Jiang Pengji's plan? To him, whether it was the aristocrats or the poor, those who were useful were people, and those who were useless were just trash. In times of prosperity, the aristocrats could cover the sky with one hand. In times of chaos, etiquette collapsed. Whoever had the bigger fist was the boss. Who cared if you were an aristocrat or a poor family? Seeing that Tang Yao's head was still hanging, Yuanjing said, "Lanting is a smart person. How could she not know her own situation?" Tang Yao was even more confused when he said that. If Jiang Pengji was really clear about her situation, she should have made better use of her advantages and contacted the aristocrats. But now? The aristocrats had developed a prejudice against her, and none of them were willing to join her. Master Yuanjing said, "Zuda, you don't have to worry too much. The situation will improve in at most 5 years. It was not completely chaotic yet, and the aristocrats were still immersed in the dream of controlling everything. When the north borderline was destroyed, you don't care about me now, and you won't be able to reach me in the future. Ching heard that and glanced at Master Yuanjing from the corner of his eyes. Ching and Jiang Pengji were like teachers and friends. He vaguely knew about the latter's plan. He did not expect the teacher in Langia County to be able to see through everything so keenly. Master Yuanjing said to Tang Yao, "Zuda, come here and help me organize." Instead of letting the student go out and offend people, it was better to keep him by his side and help him compile the teaching materials to avoid getting into trouble. Putting aside Tang Yao's other qualities, at least his talent was worthy of recognition. Little did he know that Master Yuanjing's decision allowed Tang Yao to avoid a fatal crisis. Tang Yao and Jiang Pengji's conversation did not go unnoticed. The content of the conversation spread out and soon reached the ears of a few people involved. Su Ke's expression was cold. Qiguan Rang sneered when he heard that. Yang Si snorted and went straight to the door. As mentioned earlier, Yang Si's teacher was Master Yuanjing. If one were to get to the bottom of it, he and Tang Yao could be considered brothers of the same master. In his early years, Master Yuanjing traveled abroad to train himself and pick up good seedlings from his family. Yang Si, who was still a baby, was abandoned by his mother behind the door of a cheap hostel near the brothel. The place was remote and cold. When he was about to cry his last breath, Master Yuanjing happened to be practicing his sword in the backyard of the hostel. He heard the noise and picked up the baby. Master Yuanjing knew the child's background, so he did not deliberately look for the child's mother. Instead, he found a farmer nearby to raise the child. Otherwise, with Yang Si's status, how could he learn to read and write? Yang Si did not come to beat him up, and he did not introduce himself as soon as they met. Instead, he called himself Master Yuanjing's student. Tang Yao did not know his background, so he was foolishly tricked by Yang Si to learn from each other. After a round of competition, Tang Yao lost more than he won. "May I know where you are from, senior?" Tang Yao asked in hindsight. His attitude was sincere and humble. Yang Si smiled insincerely and said, "I'm from Dingjun in Qinzhou." Tang Yao's heart skipped a beat when he heard the address. He had a vague bad feeling. As expected, Yang Si stood up and flicked his sleeves. He looked humble, but he was actually mocking the other party. "He's just the son of a prostitute. He's just a lowly and immoral person. How is he qualified to be called by you?" Chapter 881. Yang Si seemed calm, but in fact, he was a hot-tempered person who refused to suffer losses. Wei Si owed him 1 copper coin worth of buns, and Yang Si could also remember it well. With the compound interest, it turned into several strings of cash. He even dared to trick his best friend, let alone a brat who spoke rudely to him. If it were not for Master Yuanjing and the Lord, Yang Si would definitely not let it go so easily. By the time Wei Si heard about Tang Yao's incident, the weather had already turned completely cold. He carefully recalled and could not help but sigh. Yang Si and Tang Yao were destined to be enemies. In his previous life, both Yang Si and Tang Yao served under Huang Song. At that time, the world was already in chaos, and the 5 kingdoms were no more. The wars between the feudal vassals became more and more intense, and the aristocratic families all took sides. Tang Yao, who had a deep prejudice against the poor, had no choice but to become an official for the sake of his family's grand plan. He chose Huang Song, who was one of the most powerful people at that time. As soon as Tang Yao arrived at Huang Song's camp, he was put in an important position and made contributions twice. He was born into a landowning household. With his addition, the landowning household under Huang Song's banner suddenly grew in power. As the lord, Huang Song did not mediate in time, inadvertently exacerbating the conflict between the two forces. The two factions fought openly and covertly, and the battle situation became more and more intense. During one of the celebratory banquets, Huang Song shared some fine wine with everyone. Tang Yao was so happy that he couldn't help but drink too much. In public, not only did he point at the mulberry tree and scold the locust tree, he even quoted classics to ridicule him as the son of a prostitute, causing Yang Si to be put on the spot. After this incident, the two of them became sworn enemies, and they were as incompatible as fire and water. At that time, the emperor had already gotten rid of the Su family and launched a sneak attack on Anshui, who had a weak military force. The conflict between her and Huang Song had been made public. After the two sides rested and reorganized, they tacitly gathered their forces and prepared for a battle to the death. The frontal battlefield was in a stalemate, so His Majesty placed the breakthrough point of the battle on the weaker flank. Coincidentally, Yang Si and Tang Yao were arranged to be together. His Majesty took advantage of Yang Si's gluttony and deliberately sent people to contact Yang Si, and deliberately let Tang Yao see it. Everyone in Huang Song's faction knew that Yang Si was a picky eater. There were very few foods that could be approved by his picky tongue. At first, Huang Song scoffed at this. This kind of lowly method of sowing discord was completely ineffective. It was fine if it happened once or twice, and Yang Si had personally explained it to Huang Song, but what if it happened more often? Many a little makes a mickle. The snowball of suspicion was getting bigger and bigger. Coupled with Tang Yao's provocation, Yang Si's situation was worrying. Even though Yang Si righteously rejected the sugar-coated bullet later, Huang Song's suspicion of him had already taken root. After that, His Majesty took the counselor's advice and played a hat trick. He successfully killed some of Huang Song's elites and asked the best calligrapher to imitate Yang Si's handwriting to write a specious letter to the enemy. Then, he deliberately exposed the flaws to Tang Yao. Since Tang Yao had obtained the evidence, he naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity easily. On the other hand, His Majesty had sent an undercover agent to secretly leak information to Yang Si, telling him to escape as soon as possible. After a whole set of punches, there was no place for Yang Si to hide under Huang Song's tent. His Majesty tricked Yang Si and weakened the flank defense line in disguise. Using this as a breakthrough, he fought bravely. Because of these experiences, Wei Si's heart ached for Yang Si. It wasn't a big problem to have a little bit of a hobby, but unfortunately, he met a black-hearted opponent and a pig-like teammate. After Huang Song was defeated, Yang Si still held a grudge and returned all the humiliation he had suffered in the past to Tang Yao. Tang Yao couldn't bear the humiliation and committed suicide by hitting the wall. In this life. Looking at the situation, although the two of them had conflicts, their feud wasn't too deep. At least, it wasn't to the point where they would fight to the death. Considering their relationship with Master Yuanjing, they probably wouldn't completely kill him, right? Wei Si's guess was right. The two of them would indeed not have a death feud. However, Tang Yao had also offended Su Ku and Qiguan Rang. Su Ku had a good temper and didn't care, but Qiguan Rang's resentment was no less than Yang Si's. Fortunately, Master Yuanjing had already decided to keep Tang Yao by his side and write the book seriously. He would make full use of Tang Yao's strengths and avoid competing with Qiguan Rang and the others on the same stage. In this way, there wouldn't be many opportunities for them to have conflicts, and they wouldn't fight to the death. This year was the second year of the farming system. God was especially kind, and there was abundant rain, so Wanzhou welcomed a rare bumper harvest. According to the rules of the farming system, the state government could receive 30 to 40% of the food. Even so, the amount of food left in the hands of the people was more than twice as much as before. The taxes collected by the state government filled the warehouse to the brim. According to Su Ku's calculations, it was enough to support Wanzhou's expenses for 3 years. When Jiang Pengji received the news, she had already taken Qiguan Rang and the others to Chongzhou. Yang Si went to Hu County according to the original plan. Feng Jin and Su Ku stayed in Wanzhou to look after the house. Of course, looking after the house in a place like Wanzhou wasn't an easy job. Feng Jin looked at the blueprint of the golden scale pavilion that his lord had left behind. He was so angry that his vision turned black. He deeply regretted making such a bad friend. Apart from the huge project of the Golden Scale Pavilion, he and Suke had to receive famous scholars and big shots from all over Dongqing. When the Golden Scale Pavilion was completed, it was estimated that they would welcome a large number of scholars from poor families. Just thinking about the huge workload, even a gentleman like Feng Jin wanted to curse and strangle his lord to death. Because of this deceitful lord, he and Jingxian didn't dare to ask for the second treasure. Doesn't your conscience hurt? A proper and elegant gentleman was now forced by Jiang Pengji to the point that he was about to become an iron-eating beast. Master, master. An attendant called out to him outside the door. What's the matter? Feng Jin's sword-like eyebrows were furrowed. The old master is here. He's outside the house now. The old master? Feng Jin had stayed up for too long. He was still feeling lightheaded. He didn't react when he heard the way he was addressed. Wait, Feng Jin shuddered and woke up in an instant. Why is father here? Wasn't the old master referring to his father? Feng Jin hurriedly put on his wooden clogs and hurriedly went to the door to welcome his father, Feng Ren. The attendant at the side secretly complained, but he didn't dare to stop Feng Jin. He could only accept his fate and follow. The travel-worn Feng Ren saw his second son's untidy clothes and untidy hair. His expression was a little strange. Feng Jin was speechless. Feng Ren received the beginner's teaching materials earlier than Master Yuanjing, but he arrived in Wanzhou nearly a month later than him. It wasn't that he deliberately delayed the time. It was entirely because it took time to organize 10,000 books. Moreover, they were all made of bamboo slips. They were packed in dozens of carriages. Not only did they move slowly, but they also encountered bad weather for a few days. In order to prevent the slips from getting damp, they had to find a village to rest for the time being. After some delay, how could his walking speed compare to Master Yuanjing's group, who had a light carriage? Your clothes are untidy and you don't care about your appearance. How dare you appear in public like this? What a scandal. Feng Ren frowned. His second son had always been steady. He didn't expect that after Feng Jin got married and became a father, he became more and more degenerate. Feng Jin was speechless. Chapter 882. Before late autumn, Jiang Pengji successfully arrived at the Chongzhou capital with more than 10,000 troops and horses and the little princess's resentment buff. Chongzhou was more northerly than Wanzhou, and the omen of winter could already be felt. When Feng Zhen and Qiguan Rang each held onto their fur cloaks and refused to let go, Jiang Pengji was still graceful. Jingtu, is there anyone in front to receive us? Jiang Pengji called out to Fu Wang, who was leading the troops from a distance. Fu Wang led the troops to clear the way. His burly and strong body rode on a tall horse. He was born with a dignified aura. However, such an extraordinary and valiant man had now furrowed his brows into a knot. Just by looking at his face, outsiders could tell that he had a lot on his mind. Hearing his lord's call from behind, Fu Wang's heart overflowed with anxiety. Jiang Pengji knew what he was anxious about. Fu Wang seemed to miss Huijun very much. He often sent her all kinds of things through the hands of others. Sometimes it was rouge and face powder that women liked, sometimes it was brightly colored silk satin, sometimes it was just one or two bunches of ordinary wild flowers. Occasionally, he even copied some interesting words for her. If he received something good, he would not forget to send it to her. However, no matter how Fu Wang tried to be friendly, Huijun avoided meeting him. What a joke. How could she let him see her appearance? Counting from the end of April, she was almost 5 months pregnant. She could not use the excuse of getting fat to coax a child to fool Fu Wang. Instead of being caught red-handed by him, it was better to continue hiding and wait until she gave birth to the child. Unfortunately, man proposes, God disposes. The weather was nice that day. Huijun was pregnant and prepared to carry books to the courtyard to read in detail to recharge herself. She did not want to be a burden to her Langjun. After the child was born, she still had to find a way to make a living and support her mother and son. Jiang Pengji knew her plan. She turned around and got Huijun a precious teaching material on arithmetic. I forgot to mention that ever since Jiang Pengji suggested the division of subjects, Qing Cheng and Master Yuanjing forgot to eat and sleep. They referred to the formula of arithmetic that Jiang Pengji gave them and searched for ancient books on related subjects. They came up with a rough teaching material on basic arithmetic. If Huijun learned well, he could arrange for her to learn from Su Ku after she gave birth and learn how to manage the household affairs. Just as she was charging, she realized that a large patch of dark clouds had descended on her head. When she looked up, a tall and burly general stood in front of her, blocking the sun above her head. The other party's tiger eyes stared at her lower abdomen in confusion. His whole body froze on the spot, motionless, as if someone had pressed the pause button. At that moment, Huijun was so shocked that her soul almost left her body. This face, she was not dead. Huijun was so frightened that she did not even bother to put on her wooden clogs. She got up and pushed Fu Wang away, running barefoot into the house. Fu Wang, Huijun was not as tall as Fu Wang. Not only were her legs shorter, but she also had to take care of the child in her belly, so she did not dare to run too fast. Before she could take 2 steps, Fu Wang grabbed her by the collar and pulled her back. Mine? Fu Wang stared at her stomach and raised his eyebrows. Huijun did not say a word. Fu Wang picked her up and placed her in the corridor. He then picked up her wooden clogs. Forget it, it's yours anyway. Fu Wang had been in Wanzhou for some time. Although Jiang Pengji had long concealed Huijun's identity, if Fu Wang was determined to investigate, he would more or less find out something. Moreover, when Fu Wang met Huijun, she was still the Empress of the Dongqing Emperor. I'm going to Chongzhou with the Lord to prepare for the war. I'm afraid I won't be back for a few years, so I wanted to come and see you. He did not expect her to give him such a big surprise. He was almost scared out of his wits. Huijun did not speak. She only used her right hand to cover her stomach and her left hand to tightly grasp the teaching materials that Jiang Pengji had given her. I've asked the Lord. You're unmarried now. The Dongqing Emperor was completely dead, and the 4th prince, Wu Majun, was only left with a skeleton. Huijun should be considered a widow now. Since she was a widow, she was unmarried. After a while, Fu Wang tried to reach out to touch Huijun's stomach. She was so scared that her whole body tensed up. When I come back, I'll teach him martial arts and reading. I won't let you work too hard. If you run into any trouble, take this to my former deputy general. He's stationed here now. If he sees this thing, he'll definitely help you if he can. Huijun looked at Fu Wang with a strange expression. He was not even sure who the child in her stomach belonged to. How dare he say that? Fu Wang was talking to himself. Huijun said with slight awkwardness, Fu. General Fu, what do you mean? You've accepted all the things I've given you over the past few months. After hearing that, Huijun almost could not react. She thought that Fu Wang's first reaction when he saw her was to take something and chop her into pieces to vent his anger. At Jiamen Pass, if she had not purposely set a trap for Fu Wang, even if he had lost, he would not have lost so badly. She did not think that this man was really interested in her. Fu Wang passed the token that he always carried with him to her hand. He said a few words in a hurry, then climbed over the wall and left. Huijun was speechless. She was wondering how Fu Wang, this uncouth man, could sneak in without a sound. Did he climb over the wall? Thinking of this, Huijun could not help but frown. Lecher, you actually think that the Lord's backyard is your home? Fu Wang liked Huijun. Knowing that she was pregnant, he changed the things he usually gave her to good medicinal herbs that were gentle and nourishing. As for whose child Huijun was, he did not think much about it. Tsang Prefecture was located in the north, and part of it was bordered by the mutated tribe. The mutated tribe was fierce and often killed people. The border was in constant chaos, causing women to lose their husbands and children to lose their fathers. After many women lost their husbands, they would still bring their ex-husband's child to marry their current husband. The current husband was also generous to his stepson, and most of them treated him like his own. This was because no one knew when something would happen to them. Raising their stepson seriously was no different from raising their own son. Fu Wang had been raised by a pack of wolves, and his adoptive father, Fu Yang, had brought him along. He had lived in such a tough environment for more than 10 years. Under the influence of what he saw and heard, Fu Wang did not feel too conflicted. As long as Hui Jun was his, then Huijun's child would also be his. He was currently preoccupied because when he left, he had sneaked a look at Hui Jun and found that her belly had grown a lot bigger. Fu Wang had once seen a woman give birth, and that had been a psychological scar for the rest of his life. There was a peasant family at the border. The husband had recently passed away, and the wife, who was more than 9 months pregnant, could only manage the household and bear the heavy burden of field work. Unexpectedly, she was too tired, and her amniotic fluid broke, and she was about to give birth on the spot. At that time, Fu Wang was still living with the wolf pack. Because it was autumn, it was not easy to find food, so he could only leave the wolf pack's territory and search for prey further away. Coincidentally, he met the woman lying in the field, her legs wide open. A baby's head with fetal hair was slowly coming out of her womb. The young Fu Wang was so scared that he was sweating all over. Chapter 883. Knowing that Jiang Pengji had arrived, Lu Shi had already sent people to meet them. Fu Wang rode forward and found that there were many people to meet them. He glanced around and saw that the young man in front was dressed in brocade clothes. His face was somewhat similar to his lord's. Fu Wang knew that his lord had a younger brother. Seeing the young man's appearance, he could roughly guess his identity. He stepped forward and asked. The young man smiled and introduced himself, confirming Fu Wang's guess. The young man's figure was on the thin side, and his appearance was delicate and elegant. He was dressed in exquisite, luxurious clothes, and his head was covered with a glossy fur coat. Just by standing there, outsiders could tell at a glance that he was an ignorant young master of a wealthy family. He was a naive child who was ignorant of worldly affairs, like a completely harmless kitten. Seeing the young man's outfit, Fu Wang labeled him in his heart, a weak rookie. After all, he was the lord's younger brother. Fu Wang got off the horse and bowed to him. I heard that my sister is here. Can you take me to see her? The young man quickly helped Fu Wang up. His smile was pure and clean, just like the pure white snow on the mountain peak. It made people unwary. Fu Wang had never heard that his lord was close to her younger brother, but he had never heard any bad rumors either. Seeing that the young man was so excited and eager, Fu Wang's cold expression softened slightly. He stood up straight. His tall and burly body made the young man feel inferior. Of course. Fu Wang got on the horse again. The young man also asked his servants to bring his mount over. His movements were clumsy, and he climbed up the horse with some difficulty. Because of the waste of time, the young man smiled at Fu Wang a little embarrassedly after he sat down. General, please lead the way lest my sister gets anxious. Fu Wang didn't comment. He led the young man to see Jiang Pengji. The young man sat on the back of the horse. He held the reins with one hand and clumsily pressed his hair scarf with the other. He used his arm to block the whistling autumn wind. Seeing that, Fu Wang could not help but label the young man as a good-looking but useless vase. He was a man, but he was so rusty in horsemanship. It was really embarrassing. Fu Wang silently led the way and brought the young man to Jiang Pengji. When the young man slowly appeared in the camera range of the streaming room on a tall horse, the audience was already screaming. Xiahou Zishuan, oh my god, I just saw my first love. Lian Mianzi, how shameless. That's my baby's fiancé. Which little b *tch wants to snatch him from my baby? Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, don't you think that this young man looks a bit like the streamer? I remember that when the host was studying in Langyi, he was also dressed like a rich young man, and it was even more similar when he was riding a horse. However, their auras and mental appearances were different. The host was even more spirited. This little brother was like a rich young master who had walked out of a painting. Lo Siji Lianmeng, they do look alike. Are they relatives of the host? That might not be the case. After all, it was an ancient clan society, and there were quite a lot of relatives. Speaking of which, I quite missed the way the host dressed as a man. This way, I could at least be comforted. The other party was a cute girl with a penis, and I could even dream of marrying her. Now that he had changed into women's clothing. Sigh, it was a long story. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, I've been following the live stream for so many years, but I never expected you to be such a beast in human form. The live broadcast room was still a sea of red bullet screens. Occasionally, a few pitiful blue bullet screens floated by, but they were instantly drowned by the sea of red. Due to the huge changes in the live broadcast room, the former hardcore fans were cleared out, and now the audience was much more obedient. Jiang Pengji could occasionally see a few blue bullet screens with normal content. Xingyi Yisheng, someone told me that the host of this live stream has changed, but I didn't believe it. After coming here out of admiration, she realized that her style was completely different from before. She was indeed a proper streamer. The drawing style was normal, and the only flaw was that the plot was boring. Who got single first is a dog. Looking at this handsome boy, I suddenly remembered Chao Da's description of Jia Baoyu. Her face was like the moon in mid-autumn, her complexion like the flowers at dawn in spring. Her hair was like a knife, her eyebrows like an ink painting, her nose like a hanging gall, and her eyes like autumn waves. Although she was angry, sometimes she seemed to be smiling, and sometimes she looked at him with anger and affection. In the past, when he was thinking about it, he didn't have a clear impression of it. Now, he finally had an idea. What's the name of this little brother? Seeing the two blue bullet screens, the red bullet screen viewers were also shocked. Following that, the red bullet screen asked in astonishment, so there's a Chao Da in your dimension too? Sure enough, different dimensions, same civilization. In comparison, all the people in the dimension spoke Mandarin, which didn't seem to be a big deal. Jiang Pengji looked at the bullet screen with interest. Seeing the audience mention the unfamiliar little brother, she couldn't help but shift her gaze to the distance. Sure enough, the young man in embroidered clothes who appeared in the camera was riding a horse behind Fu Wang. He also noticed her. When their gazes met, Jiang Pengji could clearly feel the joy emanating from him. Sister! The young man in embroidered clothes shouted from afar. He rode the horse a few steps faster than he was familiar with, then he climbed down from the horse's back with difficulty. Fu Wang watched from the side. He couldn't bear to look at him, so he simply stepped forward to help him, saving the young man from falling off the horse. Jiang Pengji looked at the face of the young man in embroidered clothes and nodded in response. Speaking of which, this was the first time she saw this brother of a concubine after so many years of transmigration. From his appearance, he looked like a typical member of the Lu family. Jiang Pengji recalled the children of the Lu family she had seen in her mind. Almost none of them were ugly. Because the young man's eyebrows and eyes were not fully grown, he had a bit more innocence and childishness, which made him more likable. Sister, father has already prepared a banquet and is waiting for you in the manor. He has been asking why you haven't come yet for the past few days, so he asked me to wait outside the city every day. Finally, you have come. The young man in embroidered clothes said so much in one breath. His breathing was a little rushed, and his cheeks were a little pink. He looked even more delicious and moving. The strange aunties and strange uncles in the streaming room were already hungry and thirsty. Really? Didn't I already send someone to inform you? Why does father still ask you to wait outside? Jiang Pengji's words were not pleasant to hear. Fu Wang, who was at the side, heard it. His gaze swept between her and the young man in embroidered clothes. It seemed that the relationship between the brother and sister was not good. That was true. How could one be compared to the daughter of a concubine and the son of a concubine? Even if this son of a concubine was Lu Shi's only son, his lord was so promising. Wasn't it better than having an idiot son? The face of the young man in embroidered clothes froze. He seemed to be a little depressed, but he quickly recovered his enthusiasm. Even if Jiang Pengji's attitude towards him was cold and implied that Lu Shi did not treat him well, he did not say anything. After all, it was the truth. Chapter 884. The young man responded and was about to help Jiang Pengji get on the horse. However, Jiang Pengji didn't need his help. After getting on the horse easily, the young man returned to his own horse and continued to climb up the horse's back with a clumsy posture. Jiang Pengji was amused. "You're not good at riding?" The young man shook his head and said shyly, "It's too tiring to ride. My legs and waist hurt." Jiang Pengji said, "You have to learn it well. You can't neglect it just because you're afraid of pain and tiredness." The young man smiled. "You're right. I'll learn it well." Jiang Pengji followed him and saw the smile on the young man's face. She couldn't help but ask him, "Although you and I are brother and sister and live in the same house, we haven't seen each other for years. Our relationship is weak. But looking at you, you seem to like me very much?" Her question was quite straightforward and to the point. The youth in embroidered robes was dumbfounded. After all, even if they didn't have a good relationship, they had to pretend in front of outsiders. Why would they see through the facade? The young man thought about it and answered honestly. He said, "Although you haven't seen me before, I often hear about you from the servants. I've been longing for you for a long time. What's more, if you didn't mention me to father, he wouldn't have brought me from my hometown in Hejian to his side. Although you won't believe me, I'm really grateful. I want to thank you personally." Lu Shi rarely asked about the sons and daughters of the concubines in the backyard. Before that, the young man had only seen Lu Shi a few times. Now he was valued by his father, brought to his side, and supervised every day. This was something he didn't even dare to dream of. Jiang Pengji smiled. She said, "Your father's son. Blood ties can't be severed. Even if I didn't mention this to father, you should consider marriage. He can't just ignore you. I really didn't do much." The young man said, "No matter what, I still like you very much. Father always said that if I could have 30% of your understanding, he would be satisfied. However, I feel that life is short and it's time to have fun. Understanding is something you're born with. It can't be forced. No matter how hard I try, I can't do it well. I might as well forget about it. Anyway, father and sister won't let me starve to death on the streets." Jiang Pengji couldn't help but smile. She said, "Life is short, so it's time to have fun." Zisher often said the same thing. If you meet, you might have a common language. You're the son of the family. Father won't allow you to muddle along. The embroidered clothed youth said, "Zisher? Was it Feng Zhen who worked for sister?" Listening to the elder sister's words, the younger brother was a little curious. However, he is a talent that elder sister needs to use. He can't be like little brother, who wastes his time seeking pleasure. Little brother shouldn't lead him astray. Jiang Pengji was amused by the young man in embroidered clothes. Feng Zhen was a seasoned veteran in the world of romance. If anyone was to be led astray, it would be Feng Zhen who led others astray. The youth in embroidered clothes was very talkative. He looked a little shy, but his personality was very cheerful. There was almost no awkward silence. Seeing that they were about to enter the city, Jiang Pengji said, "You're almost 15 this year, right?" The youth in embroidered robes said, "After the 12th month, I'll be 15. Has father thought about what courtesy name he wants to give you?" Although courtesy names were given after one's coronation, father and elders could name them in advance. With Lu Shi's reputation and Jiang Pengji's status, the youth in embroidered robes had a strong backing. He had the right to choose a courtesy name in advance. The youth in embroidered robes said, "Father said a while ago that he wants to pick again. After he's done, he can look at me." Speaking of his marriage, the youth in embroidered robes was not shy. Instead, he was generous. His eyes were full of curiosity about the unknown. Indeed, we should choose carefully. The group entered the city. There were few people on the streets. But looking at the people's attire and complexion, they were living a good life. Although Lu Shi had decided to retire behind the scenes, the mansion he lived in was still his old house. It was much larger than the mansion in Hejian. Lu Shi's housekeeper was looking around anxiously outside the mansion. He even stretched his neck. Seeing the target appear at the end of the long street, the old housekeeper's wrinkled face was filled with joy. Even his eyes lit up. This old servant greets the eldest lady. Jiang Pengji got off the horse and handed little White's reins to the groom. Is father here? The old housekeeper nodded vigorously. Yes, yes, yes. Master has been waiting for you all day. Jiang Pengji asked Fu Wang to set up camp outside the city. After the soldiers were settled, she entered the mansion with the old housekeeper leading the way. This daughter greets father. Jiang Pengji greeted Lu Shi. Halfway through her greeting, Lu Shi helped her up. Lanting has lost a lot of weight. You look taller than before. Jiang Pengji was only half a head shorter than Lu Shi and half a head taller than her brother. This height was not considered short among men, not to mention that she was a woman. She really stood out from the crowd. Whether it was Jiang Pengji or Lu Shi, neither of them liked to stir up emotions. The youth in embroidered robes said, "Father, I think she is tired from the long journey. Why don't you ask someone to prepare some hot soup and help her change?" Lu Shi said, "Zhao is right. I was too careless." Then, he called for the servant girl. Jiang Pengji closed the streaming room and went to wash up with the servant girl. This room doesn't look like it was cleaned recently. The servant girl said, "It has always been here. Master has prepared it for you since he came here." Jiang Pengji looked down. "Thank you, father." She took a good bath and the servant girl brought in luxurious clothes and turtle shell jewelry. After dressing up, she looked at the woman in the bronze mirror and curled her lips stiffly. It was the first time she dressed up like a woman since her transmigration. She put on makeup and put on the best clothes. She and the youth in embroidered robes looked like sister and brother. It was as if they came from the same womb. Jiang Pengji looked down and picked up a sandalwood brocade fan from the servant girl's plate. "Let's go." Jiang Pengji went to the main hall and found a few unfamiliar faces there. They were all dressed in formal attire. Lu Shi was talking to them. When he saw Jiang Pengji, he quickly got up. He said, "Lanting, come to your father's side." Jiang Pengji walked over, and the middle-aged men all looked at her with scrutinizing eyes. They all had the same question in their eyes. Was this the woman chosen by the magistrate of Liuzhou? Some people snorted disapprovingly, some were deep in thought, and some closed their eyes. They behaved like outsiders. Jiang Pengji did not need Lu Shi to introduce them. She knew that they must be related to the aristocratic families of Chongzhou. After the initial shock, the audience turned their attention elsewhere, and then they heard such infuriating words. One of them said, "The Lu Prefecture overseer is in his prime. In my opinion, it's far from time for him to abdicate his position. It's not that I'm trying to sow discord, it's just that your daughter is of marriageable age. Once they got married, they would be part of the husband's family. Third Langjun is the one who inherits the title of governor of Lu province." Jianbing Guogua, who is this? Who gave him the guts to say that? Could sowing discord be any more despicable? Jinzhu milk tea, I'm afraid he doesn't know how to spell the word death. Gubuli Baozi, streamer, don't be a coward. Give him a slap and let him have a taste of what it means to be a spinning top. He's so thick-skinned. Why doesn't he take a piss and look at himself? Is our little fairy someone you mortals can casually criticize? The audience was fuming with rage. Who didn't crawl out of their mother's womb? Only this person was special. He actually came out of the chrysanthemum? So he was a cut above others? The audience was filled with righteous indignation. They believed that Jianghu wouldn't be at a disadvantage, but allowing such a clown to jump around in front of them would affect the mood of their little fairy streamer. If their little fairy was unhappy, they couldn't be happy either. Do you know what a little fairy is? That's the Tai Sui. Provoking the Tai Sui means you have a death wish. Jianghu maintained an upright sitting posture, but the corner of her lips had a sneer of mockery. Lu Zhao quietly lowered his presence. He ate and drank, showing signs of getting closer to Yang Si. Otherwise, what else could he do? This was a meeting between the big shots. Anyone's arm was thicker than his thigh. For the sake of his life, it was better for him to be a quiet, handsome man. Regardless of whether it was his unfathomable sister, his black-hearted and merciless father, or the big shots from the aristocratic families in Chongzhou, he couldn't afford to offend any of them. Unfortunately, I'm not the mountain. When the mountain comes, it's me. Lu Zhao was implicated even though he was lying down. Hearing someone talk about him, he raised his head in a daze. He recalled what the person had just said and suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He glanced at the unhappy Lu Shi and the expressionless Jianghu from the corner of his eyes. He hurriedly laughed dryly and tried to salvage the situation. Uncles, you think too highly of me. Everyone knows of my sister's talent. You're already the lord of a prefecture before you're 20 years old. Now, you can even share my father's burdens. How can I be mentioned in the same breath as you? To tell you the truth, I'm neither good at literature nor martial arts. The teacher always scolds me for being a blockhead and not being of great use. From now on, I only hope that you can take pity on this good-for-nothing brother of yours and guide him. Lu Zhao belittled himself to be worthless and even revealed a bashful and silly smile. His cowardly attitude made the elders of the aristocratic families look at him with disdain. Lu Zhao had already backed down, but the person just now was not willing to let it go so easily. He continued to stroke his beard with a smile and said to himself, like father, like son. Why are you so humble, Third Lang Jun? There are many late bloomers in this world. You're the son of the governor of Lu Prefecture. Your future is limitless. Moreover, since ancient times, it has always been the male who inherits the family business. How can a son-in-law inherit it? Isn't this giving someone else's dowry for nothing and cutting off the family line? If the ancestors knew about this in the afterlife, they might even scold their descendants for being unfilial. For this reason, Third Lang Jun should study hard and strive to inherit the family line as soon as possible. The more he listened, the worse Lu Zhao's expression became. Today's main character was his sister, not him. This old thing who couldn't distinguish between the important and the important. Did he want to roast him to death? Lu Zhao was about to speak when he heard a soft sound. It was neither soft nor loud, but it was enough to attract everyone's attention. He saw his sister open the sandalwood brocade fan in her hand, revealing the beautiful mountains and rivers painted on the fan. The person heard the noise and provoked her maliciously. Why? Does the eldest lady of the Lu family think that I'm wrong? Jianghu looked at him with a cold smile. The person smiled proudly as if he had won a battle. In his opinion, Jianghu couldn't win against him in an argument, so she had nothing to say. TSK, he thought she would be difficult to deal with. To put it bluntly, she was just a woman who could not withstand a single blow. Chapter 886. Hearing that, the man's face turned green and white. Jianghu waved her fan and said leisurely, You have a good relationship with my father, but you don't have the right to call yourself my elder, let alone address me as the eldest lady of the Lu family. Is that something you can call me? To put it bluntly, you have already offended your superiors and have no respect for the law. According to Dongqing's laws, if I want to punish you with a small punishment, no one can find fault with it, right? The man's expression froze. He couldn't breathe, but he couldn't swallow it. Not long ago, he was still proud of himself, laughing at the little girl who gave in to him. He didn't expect her to use her power to oppress him. Did she have no shame? Oh, the little fairy has always been shameless. To prevent Jiang Pengji from continuing to attack him, he could only tidy up his state of mind and solemnly pay his respects just now. Jiang Pengji suddenly stabbed him in the heart. Just now, you said that I am of marriageable age. To put it bluntly, it's something that even my father doesn't care about, but you can't wait. At the very least, I can find a son-in-law, and their children will all have the surname Liu. After all, they will still have the blood of the Liu family. It's better than adopting someone else's fake son and pretending to raise him as one's own son. It's better. After she finished speaking, she looked at him with a faint smile. She raised her hand and closed the sandalwood brocade fan, tapping it rhythmically on her palm. The man's expression became extremely ugly. Not only was Jiang Pengji using her power to oppress him, but there was also the meaning behind her words. Everyone in Chongzhou knew that it was difficult for him to have children. He had many daughters, but there was no sign of a son. To prevent the direct line of descent from being abandoned, he could only adopt a nephew from one of his brothers as a fake son. He was still fuming. He didn't expect such an embarrassing matter to be spoken of in public by a little girl who was still wet behind the ears. His reputation was on the floor. Didn't Lu Shi just rush to Chongzhou today? Why was he so familiar with the matters in Chongzhou? Unbeknownst to him, Jiang Pengji had no time to understand the power network in Chongzhou, let alone know who they were. But that wasn't important. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyes and said, "Since it's your first offense, I won't hold it against you. Get up." The man was furious. When the others saw the situation, they re-evaluated Jiang Pengji. Zhang Xian had thought that the other party had a good temper, but from the looks of it, it turned out that the other party had a sharp personality. She didn't understand the ways of the world. If she didn't know how to build a good relationship with them at this time, she would suffer in the future. Chongzhou was not a place where a prefecture magistrate could cover the sky with one hand. Back then, Jiang Pengji had suggested that Lu Shi fight for the position of Chongzhou's magistrate. There were two reasons: the aristocratic families were scarce and they were rich in sandalwood. Landowning households were scarce, but it wasn't as if they didn't exist. On the contrary, it was precisely because of the small number of landowning households that they were especially close to one another, and their marriages were also very solid. Lu Shi had been operating in Chongzhou for many years and had only obtained a portion of the authority. The other portion was in the hands of these aristocratic families. If they sincerely wanted to cause trouble for Jiang Pengji, although it would not be to the extent of making it difficult for her to move, it would be enough to annoy her to the point of being badly battered. Lu Shi purposely arranged for both parties to meet. His original intention was to let Jiang Pengji familiarize herself with them so that they could interact more easily in the future. Who would have thought that Jiang Pengji's side would be cold and uncooperative? The aristocratic families of Chongzhou would bully Jiang Pengji because she was a woman and she was young. If Jiang Pengji was really declining, the portion of authority that Lu Shi had given her would be completely swallowed up by these aristocratic families. Everyone knew how to calculate, it was just a matter of who was faster and smarter. Without a doubt, Jiang Pengji had a personality that refused to be taken advantage of. How could she tolerate others giving her a bad attitude? She secretly gestured to Liyun, who was guarding outside. With the cover of her loose and luxurious robes, no one noticed. Lu Shi, who was at the side, spoke up to smooth things over. At the same time, he glanced at Jiang Pengji with a worried gaze. The maids carried the dining table and filed in from outside. Lu Zhao, who was squatting in the corner, saw them and his eyes lit up. At the banquet, Jiang Pengji was not facing one person's provocation. She was facing the combined suppression of all the stubborn forces in Chongzhou. However, she had already mentioned her status as the prefecture magistrate. The others could not use their status as elders to criticize her. Even so, they still had ways to make things difficult for Jiang Pengji. It seemed like they were asking her how she would govern Chongzhou in the future, but in reality, they were hinting to her not to be too stupid. Chongzhou was not her Wanzhou. The atmosphere here was very tough. Even if she was the noble prefecture magistrate, if she was unlucky and accidentally encountered a group of horse bandits who ran out to take advantage of her, she would not be able to call for help even if she called for help. It was a concern on the surface, but it was actually a threat. Lu Zhao, who was a bystander, was watching the immortals fight. He was excited to watch and was even more determined not to get involved. It was not bad to be a quiet and handsome man, to be a rarely seen sibling clan, and to be free and unfettered for a lifetime. After 3 rounds of wine, Jiang Pengji had already roughly explained her plan to farm land. The heads of the various families all declined. Taking advantage of the chaos in Chongzhou, they used tricks and plunder to annex countless fertile lands and mansions. In other words, as long as there was land in the entire Chongzhou that could be farmed, it was basically theirs. If Jiang Pengji wanted to farm land on a large scale, she would definitely have to borrow land from them. It was fine to borrow things, but she was afraid that once she lent it, she would not be able to get it back. Moreover, why would a weak woman need so much land? Farm land to deal with the northern borderline? Was she out of her mind? If she was willing to sacrifice her looks to get closer to the northern borderline, she might be able to exchange for 3 to 5 years of peace for the people of Chongzhou. None of them were willing to agree. Once it involved their own interests, the heads of the aristocratic families were like the reincarnation of loaches. They were all slippery. One said that they did not have much land. Those were the sacrificial fields of their clan and could not be lent out. One said that their fields were all barren dry land. Even if they lent it out, the crops planted there would not be able to survive. One said that their fertile lands were all within the borders of the 3 cities that the northern borderline had snatched away. In name, it was theirs, but in reality, it was all the northern borderlines. There were also people who complained that they were poor. It was not a problem to borrow the land, but they had to pay high rent. They could not let their families starve. Other than that, there were all kinds of reasons that emerged endlessly. It made people speechless. Was this the head of the aristocratic families or the head of the gangsters in the marketplace? Jiang Pengji was not in a hurry. She drank her wine on her own and occasionally talked to Lu Shi. She looked unmoved. The heads of the families were also waiting patiently. When Jiang Pengji lost her patience and panicked, they would be able to gain control. At that moment, Jiang Pengji suddenly said, "Father, do you have enough troops and horses?" Lu Shi smiled. "I think it should be enough." Jiang Pengji said, "I brought 12,000 elites from Wanzhou. Each of them can fight 1 against 5. It is indeed enough." The father and daughter talked in riddles. The others had a bad feeling. As if to confirm their guess, there was a concentrated sound of armor rubbing against each other. "What's going on outside?" Jiang Pengji knocked the closed fan on the table with a bang. The crisp sound broke the tense atmosphere. However, what she said next made people feel like they had fallen into hell. "I have always been afraid of trouble. If you are not willing to discuss it properly, then I can only find another way. Since you refuse a toast, how about drinking a forfeit?" Chapter 887. Everyone was shocked by the turn of events. They did not know that Jiang Pengji was not only a little fairy, but she was also a devil that they could not afford to offend. She flashed her knife at the slightest disagreement. She was completely different from the flirtatious and cheap people they had met before. After all, they were the leaders of the aristocratic families. They only panicked for a while before they calmed down and directed their words at Lu Shi. "Magistrate Lu, what do you mean by this? You sent out invitations and invited us here for a discussion. I didn't expect it to be a planned trap. Could it be that you and your daughter want to resort to violence? Chongzhou is not a place where you and your daughter can do whatever you want. Magistrate Lu, you and I have been officials of the same court for many years. We have a good relationship. Do you really allow your evil daughter to commit murder and threaten us?" Everyone was talking at once. Although they looked calm, they were still uneasy. Judging from the dense footsteps outside, if Lu Shi and his daughter refused to let them go, they would not be able to escape even if they had wings. Lu Shi did not react from beginning to end. He only had a faint smile on his face, as if he was watching a farce of monkeys. Lu Zhao, who was watching from the sidelines, was stunned. He hurriedly took 2 steps on his knees. Before he left, he did not forget to grab a luxurious brocade fan with a strong fragrance. "Sister, look at your posture. Don't hurt your brother by mistake." Lu Zhao stumbled to Jiang Pengji's side and looked pitiful. He was born shy, but now he deliberately acted obedient. He pulled Jiang Pengji's sleeve with one hand. He looked weak and helpless, but he could not be hated. Jiang Pengji smiled and used the sandalwood brocade fan in her hand to hit his hand. He felt a little pain and let go. His eyes were full of pity. Seeing him like that, Jiang Pengji said, "Stay here. Don't run around. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to protect you when things get chaotic." Lu Zhao nodded heavily, as if he took her words as an imperial edict. After his heart calmed down, he once again leisurely watched from the sidelines. As he expected, his elder sister, who he did not know the limits of, had terrifying combat power. She would make a big deal out of a disagreement. Although it was a little rough, it was still a good way to establish her authority. One could not use elegant methods to deal with gangsters. Jiang Pengji said, "What do you mean by indulging your daughter to commit murder? When did I want your lives?" The faces of the leaders of the aristocratic families changed. They hadn't expected Lu Shi to be determined to retire. If that was not the case, he would have spoken out to explain or mediate the situation, instead of watching from the sidelines and letting Lu Shi control the situation. If they didn't have any ill intentions, why would they send troops to besiege us? One of them sneered and said, "In this old man's opinion, it's clear that they failed to borrow the land, so they resorted to force and tried to seize it by force." Jiang Pengji raised her eyelids and said with a sarcastic smile, "Snatch? Isn't it?" Jiang Pengji said, "In my opinion, this shouldn't be considered robbery. You took it from the hands of the common people by force, forcing them to leave their homes and have nowhere else to go. Now that I have taken the stolen goods from your hands, I am also enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. How can you say it is robbery?" The audience in the streaming room kept cheering for Jiang Pengji. Many of them called until they ran out of phone bills. Yes, a head-on confrontation. A group of old fellows dared to bully their little fairy. They must be out of their minds. Zijie's Haonan, streamer, confront them head-on. Don't be a coward, we strongly support you. Lanky Yubus, I hate these insatiable vampires the most. According to the streamer's previous analysis, the land in Chongzhou that can support large-scale farming has all fallen into the hands of these vampires. Don't these people have any F***king idea of the trickery? Diwo Luo, what should we do? I feel that this streaming room can't continue. I actually agree with the streamer's opinion. Regardless of the form of robbery, it was robbery. However, Jiang Pengji, the bandit, could describe her robbing behavior in such a dignified manner that her fanboys and girls cheered for her crazily. Many of the audience laughed at themselves and continued to support Jiang Pengji after they finished mocking her. Lu Zhao, who was hiding behind Jiang Pengji, also looked surprised. He had been living in the backyard of the Lu residence since he was a child. He was a nameless and neglected son of a concubine. Fortunately, he was optimistic and steady by nature. The servants did not treat him harshly, so he gradually got used to muddling through his days. However, deep in his bones, he still had the ambition of a normal person and the desire to pursue the strong. Jiang Pengji's domineering attitude, on the contrary, shocked and fascinated him. It was as if something had suddenly poked at his weak spot. Yes. Sister said that it wasn't robbery, so it wasn't robbery. Lu Zhao stuck his head out to support Jiang Pengji. A lean and strong hand pressed on his head and pressed him back. Jiang Pengji said, "Just stay at the side and watch the show." "Who allowed you to speak?" As soon as she finished speaking, 2 tall and strong men of different styles walked in from outside. Both of them wore awe-inspiring armor. Upon closer inspection, it was Fu Wang and Li Yun. The two of them bowed to Jiang Pengji and said, "Greetings, my lord." Fu Wang continued, "My lord, the arrangements outside have been completed." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "Did you find the assassin?" Everyone was dumbfounded. There was an assassin? Why didn't they know? An ominous premonition arose in the hearts of the leaders of the aristocratic families. "The assassin is here," Fu Wang said. Jiang Pengji said, "Good." She stood up gracefully and raised her hand to unsheath the luxurious sword hanging from Lu Zhao's waist. "Who is the assassin?" Fu Wang said, "The assassin tried to assassinate my lord just now, but unexpectedly, my lord has extraordinary skills and escaped the assassination attempt." The assassin saw that the situation was not good and took the people present as hostages in an attempt to escape from the heavy encirclement. "My lord, what should we do now? Although the hostages are important, we can't let the assassin go so easily." Jiang Pengji sneered. Fu Wang said again, but if the assassin has evil intentions." The audience was stunned. Was Fu Wang talking in his sleep? The leaders of the aristocratic families understood, and their faces turned ashen. Lu Shi was determined to make life difficult for them. Where was the assassin? It was just an excuse from her, hinting that if they did not obey, they would become souls under the sword of an imaginary assassin. "Lu Shi, how dare you?" Jiang Pengji said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Having said that, Li Yun, who was at the side, quickly captured the man and brought him before Jiang Pengji. The man tried to struggle, but Li Yun's grip was too strong. He could not move an inch. "Bah! If you have the guts, then kill me. Otherwise, I'll make sure you regret it in the future." Jiang Pengji said, "Since you've said so, how can I let you live?" As soon as she finished speaking, everyone revealed a startled expression. Did she want to kill him? Before he could restrain his expression, his body was pierced by the luxurious sword that looked like a work of art. She actually killed him? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.